The champagne hadn't even stopped flowing when the screens lit up. One moment, Duke Adrian Halverson stood at the center of his grand ballroom, surrounded by the glittering elite of high society. The next, his financial records. Every hidden debt, every falsified account, every desperate lie, blazed across the walls in cold, unforgiving numbers. The room fell silent. 300 guests stared at the man who'd built an empire on illusion, watching it crumble in real time. But this wasn't where it started. To understand how Adrian Halverson fell, you have to go back 6 months to when he still believed he could outrun the truth. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Adrian Halverson learned early that appearances weren't just important, they were everything. His father had taught him that. The old Duke, stern-faced and calculating, had drilled it into him from childhood. Control the narrative, and you control your world. It didn't matter what happened behind closed doors. What mattered was what people saw, what they believed, what they whispered at dinner parties and charity auctions. And for 34 years, Adrian had mastered that lesson. He stood now in the east wing of Halverson Manor, adjusting his cufflinks in a mirror that had belonged to his great-grandfather. The reflection staring back at him was exactly what it needed to be. Sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair with just enough silver at the temples to suggest wisdom rather than age. A tailored midnight blue suit that cost more than most people made in a year. Behind him, the manor hummed with controlled chaos. Staff rushed through corridors, preparing for tonight's gala. The Spring Luminance, they were calling it. 250 guests, a 12-course meal, an orchestra flown in from Vienna, champagne that cost $800 a bottle. It would be magnificent. It had to be. Your Grace. The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, his estate manager. Mid-50s, graying, with the kind of perpetually worried expression that had deepened considerably over the past 18 months. Adrian didn't turn from the mirror. Problem? The caterer is asking about payment. They're requesting, tell them they'll have it by week's end. They're asking for half now, before they unload. Adrian's fingers paused on his second cufflink. Did you explain who they're working for? I did. They were apologetic but firm. Now Adrian turned, his expression cool. Then pay them from the household account. Marcus shifted his weight. A tell Adrian had learned to read years ago. It meant bad news delivered gently. Your Grace, the household account is... Find it, Marcus. Adrian's voice remained pleasant, but something beneath it hardened. I don't care which account it comes from. Make it work. For a moment, Marcus looked like he might argue. Then he nodded, his shoulders sagging slightly. Of course, Your Grace. As Marcus retreated, Adrian returned to the mirror, but the face staring back at him seemed fractionally less certain than it had been 30 seconds ago. The truth he couldn't speak aloud, couldn't even fully acknowledge to himself most days, was that the money was gone. Not scarce, not tight, gone. 3 years ago, Adrian had diversified. That's what his financial advisor had called it. Diversification, like it was some sophisticated strategy rather than panic disguised as ambition. He'd sunk millions into a tech startup that promised to revolutionize transportation. Then a pharmaceutical company developing a miracle drug. Then property developments in 3 countries, each one guaranteed to triple his investment within 2 years. Every single one had failed. The tech startup had collapsed under fraud investigations. The pharmaceutical company's miracle drug had killed 4 people in clinical trials. The property developments had been built on corrupt permits that were revoked before the first foundation was poured. And Adrian, who'd spent his entire life learning to control narratives, had discovered that money, real money, old money, the kind of wealth his family had accumulated over 2 centuries, could vanish faster than reputation. He'd been covering it for 22 months now, moving money between accounts like a shell game, selling off assets quietly. A painting here, a rare book collection there, always through private sales, never auctions where people might ask questions. He'd liquidated his mother's jewelry last winter piece by piece. The Cartier diamond necklace she'd worn to his father's funeral had paid for 3 months of staff salaries. But there were limits to how long you could juggle air and call it wealth. Adrian? The voice from the doorway was softer than Marcus's, threaded with concern that actually sounded genuine. Elena Vasquez had been part of his household for 6 years, officially as his personal secretary, but realistically as the person who kept his life from completely unraveling. She was 42, precise, unflappable, with dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested efficiency rather than style. She was also one of 3 people who knew the full extent of his financial collapse. "The flowers are here," Elena said. "They're asking about placement." "Whatever the event coordinator decided is fine." "Adrian." Elena stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk about tonight. Tonight is going to be perfect. Tonight is going to cost $93,000 we don't have." Adrian finally turned to face her fully. "Elena, I'm not lecturing you. I'm stating facts." She pulled a tablet from under her arm, though she didn't look at it. She'd memorized the numbers. "The caterer wants $50,000 now, $20,000 on delivery. The orchestra's contract requires payment before they perform. The champagne alone, I know the numbers. Then you know we can't sustain this." Elena's voice remained calm, but something urgent flickered beneath it. "After tonight, we have 6 weeks of operational funds. Maybe 7 if we defer the groundskeeper and half the kitchen staff." "Then what?" Adrian moved past her, toward the window overlooking the south gardens. Below, workers were erecting the massive tent where dinner would be served. White silk, crystal chandeliers suspended from the ceiling, tables arranged in perfect symmetry. "After tonight," Adrian said quietly, "I'll have access to new investment opportunities." Elena was silent for a moment. "What kind of opportunities?" "The Cromwell Foundation. Maxwell Ashford indicated they might be interested in a partnership." "Maxwell Ashford, who divested from your father's shipping company 3 years before it collapsed?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "That was different." "Was it?" He turned sharply. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. "I'm suggesting that Maxwell Ashford is a vulture who circles dying fortunes, and if he's showing interest in yours, it's because he smells blood." "Then maybe I should be grateful someone's interested at all." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and for a moment something painful flickered across Elena's face before her expression smoothed back into professional neutrality. "I'll make sure the caterer gets their payment," she said quietly, and left. Adrian stood alone in the vast room, surrounded by furniture worth more than most houses. Hanging on by threads he was running out of ways to tie together. His phone buzzed. The screen showed an unknown number, which meant it was probably a creditor who'd gotten tired of calling the estate line where Marcus could deflect. Adrian ignored it. The phone buzzed again immediately, the same number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Mr. Halverson?" The voice was male, young, unfamiliar. "My name is David Chen. I'm a research assistant with the Metropolitan Standard. I'm calling to verify some information for a story we're working on." Adrian's stomach dropped, but his voice remained smooth. "I'm afraid I don't do interviews without scheduling through my publicist." "This isn't exactly an interview. We're investigating some financial irregularities involving several major estates, and your name came up in connection with, I think you have incorrect information. 3 property developments in Bulgaria, Romania, and coastal Spain. The partnerships were registered under Halverson Holdings, LLC. Is that your company?" The room seemed to tilt slightly. "I'm going to have to call you back," Adrian said. "We're running the story Monday. I'm giving you a chance to comment before—" Adrian ended the call. His hands weren't shaking. He wouldn't allow them to. But something cold had settled in his chest, spreading outward like frost on glass. Monday. 4 days. He pulled up his contacts, scrolled to a name he'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. Philip Grantham, investigator. Grantham was expensive, discreet, and specialized in making problems disappear, or at least burying them deep enough that they stopped causing immediate trouble. The call connected after 2 rings. "Adrian." Grantham's voice was gravelly, unsurprised. "Was wondering when I'd hear from you. I need information on a journalist. David Chen works for the Metropolitan Standard. What kind of information?" "Everything. Who he's talking to, what he has, how close he is to running something that could damage me." There was a pause. "This is going to cost you. How much?" "25 up front. Another 25 when I deliver." $50,000. Adrian didn't have to learn about a story that might expose the fact that he didn't have $50,000. "Fine. I need it by Sunday. I'll see what I can do." Adrian ended the call and stood in silence, staring at the gardens below where workers continued building his elaborate fiction. The gala began at 8. By 7:30, the manor blazed with light. Every chandelier lit, every window glowing, the grounds transformed into something from a fairy tale. The tent, massive, opulent, perfect, rose against the twilight like a cathedral of silk and crystal. Adrian descended the main staircase as the first guests arrived, his smile easy, his posture relaxed. He changed into a different suit, this one midnight black with subtle silver threading that caught the light when he moved. Duke Halverson. Margaret Ashford appeared in the entrance hall, dripping in diamonds that were definitely real. What an absolutely magnificent evening. Mrs. Ashford. Adrian took her hand, brushing his lips across her knuckles, a gesture that was technically outdated but that women of Margaret's generation expected. You look radiant. She preened. Behind her, Maxwell Ashford approached with the predatory smile of a man who knew he held cards you didn't. Adrian. Maxwell's handshake was firm, prolonged. Quite the spectacle. Must have cost a fortune. Worth every penny to gather such exceptional company. Maxwell's smile widened. Indeed, we should talk later about the opportunity I mentioned. I look forward to it. More guests flooded in. Adrian worked the room with practiced ease, remembering names, asking after children and grandchildren, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, performing the role of gracious host with the skill of someone who'd been doing it since childhood. But beneath the performance, his mind calculated. Chen. The story. Monday. He caught Elena's eye across the room. She stood near the entrance to the main dining hall, tablet in hand, coordinating the evening's logistics with the efficiency of a general. When she noticed his gaze, she gave a barely perceptible nod, everything running on schedule. Duke Halverson? Adrian turned to find a woman he didn't recognize. Mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back, wearing a dress that was expensive but not ostentatious. Something about her seemed sharp, focused in a way that made his instincts prickle. Yes? She extended her hand. Evelyn Carter. I write for Highborn magazine. I'm doing a piece on the evolution of modern aristocracy. Adrian's smile didn't waver, but internally, alarms blared. Carter. He knew that name. Evelyn Carter. Not society fluff pieces. Investigative journalism dressed up as lifestyle content. She'd broken the story about the Pemberton Foundation embezzlement last year, destroyed a senatorial campaign 3 years back by uncovering financial ties to organized crime, and now she was in his house. Ms. Carter. He shook her hand firmly. I'm afraid I don't recall receiving an RSVP from Highborn. I came as Marcus Thornberry's guest. She gestured vaguely toward the crowd. He mentioned you might be interested in some positive coverage of tonight's event. Marcus Thornberry ran a hedge fund and liked to think of himself as Adrian's friend. He wasn't wrong, but Adrian's definition of friendship had become increasingly transactional lately. Always happy to accommodate the press, Adrian said smoothly. Though perhaps we could schedule a formal interview for... Actually, I was hoping we could chat briefly now. Evelyn's smile was pleasant, professional. Just background information, nothing invasive. Every fiber of Adrian's training screamed at him to deflect, to postpone, to maintain control. But refusing would seem suspicious, and he needed to know what she knew, what angle she was working. Of course. Shall we step into my study? Quieter there. Perfect. He led her through the crowd, nodding at guests, making small talk with people whose names he'd forgotten the moment after greeting them. His study was in the West Wing, wood-paneled, lined with books his father had collected, a massive desk positioned to suggest authority. Adrian gestured to a leather chair. Please. Evelyn sat, pulling a small recorder from her purse. Do you mind? Not at all. She pressed record. So Duke Halverson, the Spring Luminance Gala. This is your third major event this year. Some might say you're setting a new standard for aristocratic entertaining. I prefer to think of it as honoring tradition while embracing contemporary elegance. Your guest list tonight includes CEOs, politicians, cultural icons. You've built quite the network. I've been fortunate in the company I keep. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. There's been some discussion in financial circles about your investment portfolio, specifically your recent diversification into international property development. Adrian's expression remained pleasant, curious. I'm not sure I'd call it recent. My family has had holdings abroad for generations. Of course. But the Bulgarian partnership, that was established only 2 years ago, correct? Approximately, yes. And the Romanian project? Similar timeline. Evelyn consulted notes on her phone. Both projects have stalled. The Spanish development was cancelled entirely. Some estimates suggest combined losses in the 30 to 40 million range. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I'm afraid your sources are misinformed, Adrian said, his tone still light but with an edge now. Property development is complex, timelines shift, but the fundamentals remain sound. Have you considered that someone might be investigating those fundamentals? The question landed like a blade. Adrian leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Ms. Carter, are you here as a journalist covering a gala or as someone fishing for scandal? I'm here because I follow money. And when money moves in interesting patterns, people hiding losses, maintaining appearances despite obvious financial strain, I get curious. Curious enough to crash my event? I didn't crash. I was invited. By a guest. Not by me. Evelyn smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Duke Halverson, I've been tracking financial irregularities in the aristocratic class for 3 years. You're not the first titled family to overextend, but you might be the first to do it on this scale while pretending nothing's wrong. Adrian stood. I think this interview is over. Is it true you've been liquidating personal assets to cover operational expenses? This interview is over. Evelyn stood as well, unfazed. She clicked off the recorder. Thank you for your time. It's been illuminating. She walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. David Chen from the Metropolitan Standard. He contacted you earlier today, didn't he? Adrian said nothing. We're colleagues, Evelyn continued. We share information sometimes. Whatever he's found, I'm finding it too. And it's not going away just because you throw another party. She left. Adrian stood in the study, his carefully maintained composure cracking at the edges. Through the walls, he could hear music starting, the orchestra beginning their first set. Laughter, conversation, the sounds of people enjoying the illusion he'd built. His phone buzzed. Marcus Webb. Payment issue with orchestra. Need immediate resolution. Then another message. Elena, we need to talk, now. And finally, an email notification. Philip Grantham, initial report ready. Adrian opened Grantham's message. It was brief, professionally written, and devastating. Chen has documents, partnership contracts, bank transfers, testimony from contractors who weren't paid. Planning to publish Monday morning. Evelyn Carter is working parallel investigation. They're coordinating. Cannot contain both. Adrian deleted the email, pocketed his phone, and returned to the gala. The party was in full swing now. Guests filled the tent, seated at tables draped in white linen, crystal glasses catching candlelight. The orchestra played something classical, elegant. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than most people spent on dinner. Adrian took his seat at the head table, between Margaret Ashford and Senator Patricia Vance, and smiled like a man who owned the world. Maxwell Ashford stood to give a toast. To Duke Halverson, Maxwell said, raising his glass. A man who understands that true legacy isn't just about maintaining what we inherit, it's about building something greater. Everyone drank. Adrian drank. The champagne tasted like ash. The evening wore on. Dinner was served, 12 courses, each more elaborate than the last. Guests praised the food, the ambiance, the sheer artistry of the event. Adrian accepted compliments graciously, laughed at jokes, engaged in conversations about nothing of consequence. But his mind kept returning to Evelyn Carter, sitting somewhere in this crowd, watching him, cataloging evidence, building her story. And Chen, working on his own investigation, preparing to publish in 4 days. Between courses, Adrian excused himself. He found Elena near the kitchen entrance, looking exhausted. The orchestra? He asked quietly. Paid from the reserve account. We have a reserve account? Elena's expression was answer enough. She'd moved money from somewhere, probably somewhere it would be missed soon. Thank you, Adrian said. Don't thank me. This is unsustainable. I know. Do you? Elena's voice dropped even lower. Because from where I stand, you're accelerating toward a cliff while pressing the gas pedal. I'm handling it. You're not. Evelyn Carter is in your house right now, building a story that will destroy everything, and you're serving canapes. Adrian glanced around, ensuring no staff were close enough to overhear. What would you have me do? Cancel the evening? Admit defeat in front of 300 people? I'd have you face reality before it faces you. Reality can wait 4 more hours. Elena stared at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, he saw something that looked like pity. You're really going to ride this all the way down, aren't you? Adrian didn't answer. He returned to the table. Dessert was being served. Some elaborate construction of chocolate and gold leaf that probably required a culinary degree to create. Senator Vance leaned toward him. Adrian, I wanted to discuss the education initiative we talked about last month. Of course. We're looking for private donors to supplement the foundation. I was hoping you might consider, send me the details, I'll review with my team. The senator smiled, satisfied. She had no idea she was asking a drowning man to donate water. Across the tent, Adrian spotted Evelyn Carter at a table near the back. She wasn't eating. She was watching, her phone in her hand, occasionally typing notes, building her case. The orchestra finished their set. A brief pause, then they launched into something more upbeat, dance music for after dinner. Guests began moving to the designated dance floor area, couples pairing off. Adrian excused himself again. He needed air, space, 5 minutes where he wasn't performing. He slipped out a side entrance of the tent, into the garden. The night was cool, stars visible despite the glow from the manor. He walked past sculpted hedges toward a fountain that had been in his family for 4 generations. He'd have to sell it soon. Everything would have to be sold soon. There you are. Adrian turned to find Maxwell Ashford approaching, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He offered one to Adrian. Thought you might need this. Adrian accepted. Thank you. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the fountain, the distant music from the tent. Hell of an event, Maxwell said finally. It turned out well. Must have cost a fortune. It was worth it. Maxwell sipped his whiskey, studying Adrian. You know what I've always admired about you, Adrian? Your commitment to appearances. Most people would have cut back by now, downsized, made adjustments, but not you. You double down. Adrian said nothing. I had dinner with Theodore Pemberton last week, Maxwell continued. Before his legal troubles really exploded, he told me something interesting. He said the hardest part wasn't losing the money. It was losing the ability to pretend he hadn't. Why are you telling me this? Maxwell turned to face him directly. Because I know, Adrian, I've known for 6 months, the failed partnerships, the liquidations, the shell game with your accounts. I know all of it. Adrian's hand tightened on his glass. I'm not here to judge, Maxwell continued. I'm here to offer you a way out. What kind of way out? The Cromwell Foundation partnership I mentioned, it's real, but it requires full disclosure of your current financial position and transfer of controlling interest in Halverson Holdings. In exchange, we stabilize your situation, quietly, discreetly, before anyone publishes anything that can't be taken back. And what do I get out of this arrangement? You get to keep your reputation, your title, your social standing. You just don't get to keep control. Adrian stared at the fountain. You want to buy me out. I want to save you from a much worse fate. Chen's story publishes Monday. Carter's probably follows within the week. By the end of the month, you'll be a cautionary tale. This way, you're a success story. Duke, who successfully transitioned his holdings into a modern partnership structure. Visionary, even. While you control everything I built. While I control everything you're about to lose anyway. Maxwell's voice softened slightly. Adrian, I'm not your enemy. I'm your last option. And Monday is coming whether you accept that or not. He finished his whiskey, set the glass on the fountain's edge, and walked back toward the tent. Adrian stood alone in the garden, surrounded by 4 generations of accumulated power, holding on to it with fingers that were finally, inevitably, beginning to slip. His phone buzzed. Elena. Where are you? We have a situation. Adrian hurried back inside. He found Elena in the main hallway, her face pale. Behind her, 2 men in cheap suits stood with the kind of posture that suggested law enforcement. Duke Halverson? The taller one held up a badge. I'm Detective Morris. This is Detective Chen. We need to ask you some questions about financial irregularities related to the Eastern European property developments registered under your company. The floor seemed to shift beneath Adrian's feet. "I'm in the middle of hosting an event," he said, his voice remarkably steady. "We're aware. We can either do this here, discreetly, or we can do it at the station. Your choice." Through the windows, Adrian could see his guests still dancing, drinking, celebrating. "Give me 5 minutes," he said. The detectives exchanged glances, then nodded. Adrian turned to Elena. "Keep everything running. No matter what happens, keep everything running." "Adrian, please." He followed the detectives to his study, closed the door, and spent the next 40 minutes answering questions he couldn't answer honestly without destroying himself. When he finally emerged, the party was still going. The orchestra still played. Guests still laughed. But something had shifted. A few people glanced at him strangely. Whispers followed in his wake. Marcus Webb intercepted him near the tent entrance. "Your Grace." Marcus's voice was low, urgent. "People are asking questions about the detectives. Tell them it was a routine security matter related to one of the guests." "Adrian, some of the staff are talking about payment delays, about—" "Handle it, Marcus." Adrian returned to his seat at the head table, where dessert plates had been cleared and coffee was being served. He picked up his cup with a hand that didn't shake, sipped coffee he didn't taste, and smiled at people whose trust he was days away from betraying. Midnight approached. The party began to wind down. Guests started making their exits, thanking Adrian for the magnificent evening, promising to reciprocate with invitations to their own events. Maxwell Ashford paused on his way out. "Think about my offer. You have until Sunday." Senator Vance kissed his cheek. "Truly marvelous, Adrian." Margaret Ashford gushed about the flowers. Evelyn Carter was one of the last to leave. She approached him near the door, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for the interview earlier," she said. "Of course. I'll send you a draft of my article before it runs, professional courtesy." "I appreciate that." She studied him for a moment. "You know what I've learned covering people like you? The fall is never the hardest part. It's the moment right before, when you know it's coming, but you're still pretending it's not. That's when it really hurts." "Good night, Ms. Carter." "Good night, Duke Halverson." By 2 a.m., the last guest had departed. Adrian stood in the now empty tent, surrounded by the wreckage of perfection. Chairs pushed back from tables, wine glasses with lipstick stains, candles burned down to nothing. Elena found him there. "The final tally is in," she said quietly. $96,400. "And we have?" "Enough to cover staff salaries for 3 weeks. After that, nothing." Adrian nodded slowly. "The detectives," Elena continued. "They'll be back. With warrants, probably." "I know. Evelyn Carter has everything she needs for her story." "I know. Chen's article publishes in 3 days." "I know." Elena moved to stand beside him, looking at the ruins of the evening's grandeur. "So what now?" Adrian was quiet for a long time. "Now," he said finally, "we wait for the world to end." But even as he spoke, somewhere deep in his mind, a different voice whispered, "No, now we fight." Because the thing about falling was that you had a choice. You could go down quietly, or you could burn bright enough on the way down that everyone remembered the light. Adrian Halverson wasn't sure which he'd choose yet. But Monday was coming, and he'd be damned if he faced it as anything less than what he'd always been, a man who controlled the narrative, even if the story he was telling had started to write itself. The tent lights flickered. Outside, dawn was still hours away. Adrian didn't sleep. He sat in his study as dawn crept through the windows, staring at financial statements that had stopped making sense weeks ago. Numbers that used to represent power now just represented how spectacularly he'd failed at the one thing his father had taught him mattered: control. His phone lay on the desk, silent, waiting. At 6:30, it rang. Adrian Halverson. He didn't recognize his own voice, too flat, too tired. "It's Grantham. We need to meet. Not over the phone." "When?" "Now. There's a diner on Halstead and 5th. Be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Adrian changed into casual clothes, jeans, a sweater, nothing that screamed, Duke attending secret meeting about his crumbling empire. He left through the service entrance, avoiding the main halls where staff were already cleaning up from last night's disaster disguised as triumph. The diner was exactly what he expected. Fluorescent lights, cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the 80s. Grantham sat in the back corner, looking like every middle-aged private investigator in every crime drama. Tired eyes, wrinkled shirt, the expression of someone who'd seen too much human stupidity to be surprised by anything. Adrian slid into the booth across from him. Grantham pushed a manila folder across the table. "Read it, don't touch it." Adrian opened the folder. Inside were printouts, bank statements, emails, photographs. His stomach sank further with each page. "Chen has all of this?" he asked. "And more. He's been building this story for 4 months. Your failed partnerships are just the opening act. He's tracking every asset sale, every account transfer, every payroll delay. He's talked to contractors you stiffed, staff members you've laid off, creditors who filed quiet lawsuits." "How quiet?" "Quiet enough that they haven't hit public record yet. But they will. Monday morning, Chen's article drops, and every media outlet in the country will start pulling court filings. By Monday afternoon, you'll be radioactive." Adrian flipped to the photographs. One showed him at a private auction 3 months ago, selling his mother's antique writing desk. Another captured Elena at a bank, probably making yet another emergency transfer to keep the lights on. "Who took these?" "Chen hired someone. Professional. Discreet." Grantham leaned back. "Here's the part that should really worry you. Evelyn Carter isn't just working a parallel investigation. She and Chen are coordinating. They're planning a 2-pronged release. Chen hits you with the financial collapse angle. Carter follows up with the deeper story, how aristocratic families maintain illusions while everything underneath rots away." "You're saying I'm the case study." "You're the headline." Adrian closed the folder. His hands were steady, but something inside him felt like it was coming apart at the seams. "Can you stop it?" Grantham laughed, short, humorless. "Stop 2 investigative journalists who've spent months building airtight stories? No. I can maybe delay one of them. Buy you a week, if you're lucky. But it'll cost you $75,000, and frankly, I don't think you have $75,000. "I don't." "Then you have 3 options." Grantham ticked them off on his fingers. 1. Let the stories run and deal with the fallout. 2. Come clean yourself before they publish. Control the narrative as much as possible. 3. Do something desperate and stupid that makes everything worse. Those aren't great options. No, they're not. Adrian stared at the folder, at the evidence of his failure, documented and ready to go viral. "What would you do?" Grantham considered. "Honestly, I'd take Maxwell Ashford's offer. Let him buy you out, rebrand the whole thing as strategic restructuring. You lose control, but you keep your dignity. Maybe even your reputation. And spend the rest of my life as Maxwell's trophy acquisition. Better than spending it as a cautionary tale." Adrian pushed the folder back across the table. "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long. Monday's not negotiable." Outside, the morning had turned gray and cold. Adrian walked back to the manor, taking the long route through streets he used to own by reputation alone. Now, they just felt like streets. When he arrived home, Marcus was waiting in the entrance hall, looking even more anxious than usual. "Your Grace, we have a situation." "Another one?" "The groundskeeping staff. They're refusing to work until they receive back pay. 3 months' worth." Adrian felt something that might have been a laugh trying to escape. 3 months? You approved deferment. Twice. How much do we owe them? 42,000. Tell them they'll have it by the end of next week. Marcus's expression said he'd rather tell them anything else. "Your Grace, they're not asking, they're demanding, and if we don't pay, they're threatening to go to the media." "The media?" "Yes. With what story? Duke temporarily delays payments during accounting transition?" "With the story that you've been systematically underpaying staff for months while throwing parties that cost 6 figures. Adrian stood very still. "Who said that?" "One of the groundskeepers. James Pritchard. He's got friends who work at the Gazette." Of course he did. Because everything was falling apart at once, like the universe had decided to pile on just to see how much one man could take before breaking completely. "Schedule a meeting with the groundskeeping staff for this afternoon," Adrian said. "I'll talk to them directly." "Are you sure that's—" "Marcus, set up the meeting." He climbed the stairs to his private quarters, each step feeling heavier than the last. Elena intercepted him on the second-floor landing. I heard about the groundskeepers, she said. News travels fast. It's a small staff. Everyone knows everything. She paused. Adrian, if they go to the press, it accelerates the timeline. Chen's story won't wait until Monday. He'll publish immediately. I know. So what are you going to do? Adrian looked at her. This woman who'd kept his world functioning through sheer force of will, who'd moved money like a magician until there was no money left to move, who probably should have quit months ago, but hadn't. I'm going to make them an offer, he said. What kind of offer? The kind that buys me 3 more days. The meeting with the groundskeeping staff took place in the south drawing room at 2 p.m. 15 men, most of them middle-aged, all of them angry. They stood rather than sat, a wall of resentment facing Adrian across expensive furniture that suddenly felt obscene. James Pritchard, the ringleader, stepped forward, late 40s, weathered skin, calloused hands. He'd worked at Halverson Manor for 12 years. Your Grace. His tone made the title sound like an accusation. We've been patient. We've trusted you when you said the delays were temporary. But 3 months without full pay while you host parties that cost more than we make in a year, that's not temporary. That's taking advantage. Adrian didn't sit either. He stood facing them, no desk between them, nothing to hide behind. You're right, he said. The room went quiet. I've failed you. Not because I wanted to, but because I made bad decisions that had consequences I didn't anticipate. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. Pritchard's expression didn't soften. We don't want apologies. We want our money. I know, and you'll have it, but I need your help with something first. Our help? Adrian took a breath. This was the desperate, stupid thing Grantham had warned against. But it was also the only move he had left. In 3 days, a story is going to publish about my financial situation. It will not be flattering. When it does, every media outlet in the country will descend on this estate looking for people to interview, staff members who can confirm the narrative, add color to the scandal. And you want us to lie for you? Pritchard's voice rose. Protect your reputation while we're still waiting for money you owe us? No. I want you to tell the truth, but I want you to wait 3 days before you do it. The room erupted. Men talking over each other, voices angry, disbelieving. Why would we wait? Someone called out. Yeah, what's in it for us? Adrian raised his hand. The voices died down, though the anger remained. Here's what I'm offering, he said. I have assets, physical assets, art, furniture, vehicles, things worth actual money. I can't liquidate them in 3 days. That takes time, proper channels. But I can transfer ownership, today, right now. Pritchard frowned. Transfer ownership to who? To you. 15 of you, 3 months back pay each. I'll divide assets among you proportionally. You can sell them yourselves, keep the proceeds, or hold on to them if you think they'll appreciate. Either way, you get what you're owed. The men exchanged glances. That's unconventional, someone muttered. It's also illegal, Pritchard said flatly. You can't just give away assets when you've got creditors circling. I can if I do it before any lawsuits are filed. Right now, those assets are mine to dispose of as I see fit, including using them to pay legitimate debts to employees. And the 3-day delay? Gives me time to handle the Chen story on my terms, to try to salvage something before it becomes a feeding frenzy. Pritchard studied him. What happens after 3 days? After 3 days, you can talk to whoever you want. Tell them whatever you want. I won't stop you. I won't retaliate. You'll have your compensation, and you'll owe me nothing. And if you're lying, if these assets turn out to be worthless, then you're no worse off than you are now, and you get to tell the press I'm not just a failed aristocrat. I'm also a con artist. Several men laughed, though it wasn't entirely friendly. Pritchard consulted quietly with 2 other men, then turned back to Adrian. We want it in writing, legal documents, proper transfers. Elena will have everything drawn up by this evening. And we want to choose our own assets, not just take whatever you decide to give us. Adrian nodded. Fair. I'll provide an inventory. You pick first in order of seniority. More muttering, more consultation. Finally, Pritchard extended his hand. 3 days. Not a minute longer. Adrian shook it. 3 days. After they left, Elena found him in the drawing room, staring at the Persian rug his grandfather had bought at auction in 1952. That rug's worth about 40,000, she said. I know. The Monet in the East Gallery is worth significantly more. I know that too. You just gave away half your remaining liquid assets. Yes. Elena sat down, not in a chair but on the floor, her back against an antique sofa, like she was too tired to maintain professional posture anymore. This is the stupid option, isn't it? The one Grantham warned against? Probably. But it buys you 3 days. That's the idea. What are you going to do with 3 days? Adrian finally looked at her. I'm going to do what I should have done 6 months ago. I'm going to tell the truth. To who? Everyone. Elena's eyes widened. Adrian, not the way Chen wants to tell it. Not as a scandal or a cautionary tale. I'm going to write my own story. Control the narrative one last time. How? Adrian pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and pressed a number he'd been avoiding for 2 years. The call connected after 4 rings. Adrian Halverson. The voice on the other end was female, sharp, vaguely amused. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Hello, Miranda. Miranda Chen, no relation to David, ran Society, now a digital media platform that straddled the line between legitimate journalism and high-end gossip. She was ruthless, connected, and had an audience of 12 million followers who hung on her every word. She was also Adrian's ex-girlfriend from a decade ago, back when they were both young and stupid and thought the world owed them everything. I need a favor, Adrian said. Miranda laughed. You're calling in a favor? Now? When you're about to become the most infamous duke in modern history? How do you know about that? Please, everyone knows. David Chen's been shopping his story around for weeks, building buzz. It's all anyone's talking about in certain circles. Then you know I don't have much time. I know you have until Monday. What do you want from me? An interview. Exclusive. I tell you everything. The failed investments, the asset sales, the staff delays, all of it. Miranda was quiet for a moment. You want to confess? I want to control how the confession happens. And you think giving me the story before Chen publishes will somehow make you look better? I think it makes me look honest, like I'm not hiding, like I'm taking responsibility. It also makes you look desperate. I am desperate. Another pause, then. When? Tomorrow. 12 hours to prep, then we record. You publish Sunday night, 24 hours before Chen. He's going to lose his mind. That's not my problem. Miranda laughed again, but this time it sounded almost affectionate. You always were good at burning bridges in spectacular fashion. Fine. Tomorrow, 1 p.m., my studio. Come alone. And Adrian, don't think about backing out. If you no-show, I'll run a story about you no-showing, and that'll be worse than anything Chen's planning. I'll be there. He ended the call. Elena was staring at him. Did you just give Miranda Chen an exclusive confession interview? Yes. Miranda Chen, who once published a hit piece on Senator Rawlings that ended his career? The same. Adrian, she's going to eviscerate you. Probably. But she'll do it in a way that gets millions of views, and I'll be the one talking. Not sources. Not leaked documents. Me. That's worth something. Elena stood slowly, brushing dust from her skirt. I think you've officially gone insane. It's possible, but I'll have the transfer documents ready by tonight anyway. Thank you. She left. Adrian stood alone in the drawing room, surrounded by generations of accumulated wealth that he'd managed to lose in less than 3 years. His phone buzzed. A text from Philip Grantham. Heard about the groundskeeper situation. Bold move. Stupid, but bold. Hope you know what you're doing. Then another message, this one from Maxwell Ashford. My offer expires Sunday midnight. After that, you're on your own. Choose wisely. And finally, an email from David Chen. Mr. Halverson, this is your final opportunity to comment before publication. Please respond by Sunday 6 p.m. or I'll note that you declined to comment. Adrian deleted all 3 messages. He spent the rest of the day preparing. Not for the interview, that would be raw, honest, probably messy, but preparing the estate itself, making lists of assets, coordinating with Elena on the transfer documents, calling his attorney to ensure everything was legal, or at least legal enough that it wouldn't constitute fraud. By evening, exhaustion had settled into his bones. He found Elena in her office, a small room off the main library where she'd set up command central for managing his collapse. Papers everywhere. 3 laptops open, a whiteboard covered in financial calculations that all ended with negative numbers. "Documents are ready," she said without looking up. "The groundskeepers can come by tomorrow to make their selections." "Good. Adrian." Now she did look up. "The Miranda Chen interview. Have you thought about what you're actually going to say?" "Not really." "You should. She's going to ask about the staff, about contractors you didn't pay, about whether you knowingly defrauded investors." "I didn't defraud anyone. No. You just made catastrophically bad decisions and then lied about them for 2 years. That's not fraud. That's what you'll say. Miranda will find a way to make it sound like fraud anyway." Adrian sat down across from her. "What would you say if you were doing the interview?" Elena thought about it. "I'd tell them the truth nobody wants to hear, that you inherited a system designed to maintain wealth forever, but that system doesn't work anymore. That the world changed and you didn't change with it fast enough. That you tried to play by rules that stopped applying decades ago, and when that didn't work, you panicked." "That doesn't exactly make me sympathetic." "No, but it makes you human, and right now human is the best you can hope for." They worked until midnight, finalizing details, preparing for a Sunday that would either save Adrian's reputation or cement its destruction. As Elena packed up to leave, she paused at the door. "You know this won't work, right? Miranda's interview, the asset transfers, all of it. It might buy you some goodwill, but the fundamental problem remains. You're broke. Actually broke. And no amount of narrative control changes that." "I know." "So what's the end game?" Adrian looked around the office, at generations of family history reduced to spreadsheets and debt calculations. "I think the end game is admitting there isn't one, that I lost, and trying to lose with enough dignity that maybe somewhere down the line I can rebuild something real." Elena studied him. "That's the first truly honest thing I've heard you say in 2 years. I'm practicing for tomorrow." She left. Adrian stayed in the office until 3 a.m., reading old letters his father had written about duty, responsibility, legacy, about the weight of being a Halverson and what that meant. His father had died believing Adrian would carry that legacy forward. Instead, Adrian had driven it straight into the ground. At some point, exhaustion won. He fell asleep at the desk, surrounded by evidence of his failure, dreaming of conversations he'd never have, and futures that had already passed him by. He woke at 6 to his phone ringing. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Mr. Halverson?" The voice was young, nervous. "This is Rachel Vance. I'm a producer at Metropolitan Standard. David Chen asked me to reach out." Adrian's stomach dropped. "It's Saturday." "Yes, sir. Mr. Chen wanted to inform you that due to recent developments, we're moving up our publication schedule. The story will run tonight at 8 p.m. instead of Monday morning." "Tonight?" "Yes, sir. He said to tell you this is because other media outlets have gotten wind of the story and he wants to ensure proper credit and accuracy. He's giving you until 4 p.m. today to provide comment." "And if I don't?" "Then the story runs with a note that you declined to comment despite multiple attempts to reach you." Adrian checked the time. 6:17 a.m., less than 10 hours. "Thank you for letting me know," he managed. "You're welcome, sir. Have a good day." The line went dead. Adrian sat in stunned silence for approximately 30 seconds. Then he called Miranda. She answered on the first ring, voice alert despite the early hour. "Let me guess, Chen moved up his timeline." "How did you?" "Because that's exactly what I'd do if I heard a competitor was planning a preemptive interview. He's trying to beat me to publication." She paused. "Which means we need to record now, this morning, before Chen drops his story and makes yours look reactive." "How soon?" "Can you be at my studio in 2 hours?" "Yes." "Then get here, we're doing this live." "Live?" "Live. Streaming. Real time. That's the only way to beat Chen's publication schedule and maintain the authenticity angle. You confessing in real time is news. You confessing after his story drops is damage control." Adrian's mind raced. "Miranda!" 2 hours, Adrian, and bring your courage, because I'm not going easy on you just because we used to sleep together." She hung up. For a long moment, Adrian just sat there, staring at his phone, at the office, at the accumulated wreckage of his life. Then he stood, showered, dressed in clothes that looked honest rather than expensive, and left to confess his sins to 12 million strangers. The drive to Miranda's studio took 90 minutes. Adrian spent it preparing, not what he'd say, but accepting what was about to happen. The illusion was ending. Today. Now. He arrived at 7:45. Miranda met him at the door. She looked exactly like he remembered. Sharp features, dark hair cut in a severe bob, eyes that missed nothing. She'd aged well, better than he had, probably. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Thank you." "I mean it. You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "I haven't." She studied him. "Good. That'll play well on camera. People don't trust polish right now. They trust exhaustion. It looks like honesty." She led him through the studio, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and industrial lighting. 3 cameras, a simple setup with 2 chairs facing each other. "We're going live in 15 minutes, Miranda said. "No pre-interview, no agreed-upon questions. I'm going to ask what I want, and you're going to answer honestly, or this whole thing falls apart. Understood?" "Understood." Also, we're streaming this across all platforms simultaneously. Society Now, YouTube, X, Instagram. By the time we're 30 minutes in, you'll have at least 5 million people watching. That number will grow. Adrian's throat tightened. No pressure. Miranda's expression softened slightly. "Adrian, last chance to back out. Once we start, there's no stopping. Whatever you say will be permanent, analyzed, dissected, turned into memes and hot takes. Are you ready for that?" He thought about his father, about legacy, about the choice between controlling the narrative and letting the narrative control you. "I'm ready." They took their seats. Makeup touched up his face, not to make him look good, just to make him look human under the lights. A producer counted down. 3, 2, 1. The red light clicked on. Miranda smiled at the camera. "Good morning. I'm Miranda Chen, and this is a Society Now exclusive. With me today is Duke Adrian Halverson, who has requested this interview to address rumors about his financial situation that have been circulating in media circles for the past several weeks. Adrian, thank you for joining me. Thank you for having me. Let's not waste time. Are you bankrupt?" Adrian looked directly at the camera, at the 5 million people who would become 10 million by the end of the hour, at the permanent record he was about to create. "Yes," he said, "I am." And just like that, the dam broke. Miranda didn't blink. "When did you know?" Adrian's mouth felt dry despite the water bottle someone had placed beside his chair. "About 2 years ago, when the third investment collapsed." "The pharmaceutical company?" "Yes. 4 people died in those clinical trials." "I'm aware." "Did you know the drug was dangerous when you invested?" "No. I trusted the research, the projections. I trusted people who turned out to be either incompetent or dishonest, and I didn't do enough due diligence to tell the difference." Miranda leaned forward slightly. The camera angle shifted to capture both of them. "You lost how much in that investment alone?" 18 million. A number appeared on screen beside his face. $18 million. In red. "And the Bulgarian property development?" 12 million. Another number. $12 million. "Romania?" 8 million. "Spain?" 15 million. The numbers stacked on screen like an indictment. $53 million. Gone. "That's more than most people will earn in 100 lifetimes," Miranda said. Her voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "How do you lose that much money?" Adrian felt something crack inside his chest, not breaking exactly, but shifting. Like a wall he'd built was finally admitting it had no foundation. "By believing you're smarter than you are," he said quietly. "By thinking that because something has always worked, it always will. By trusting advisors who tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to know. And then, when it starts falling apart, by lying to yourself that you can fix it before anyone notices." "Did you lie to other people?" "Yes." "Who?" "Staff, contractors, creditors, friends." He paused. "Myself, most of all." Miranda consulted her tablet. 3 months ago, you hosted a gala that cost $96,000. Last week, another one. Why spend money you don't have on parties? This was the question Adrian had known would come, the one that would make him look worst. He could deflect, spin it, make it sound strategic, but he'd promised himself, promised Elena, promised the groundskeepers, promised everyone he'd failed that this would be honest. "Because I was terrified," he said. "Every time someone started asking questions or looking at me sideways, I'd throw another event to prove everything was fine. Like if I acted wealthy enough, reality would just adjust itself to match the performance. Did it work? Obviously not. Miranda's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Maybe respect? Maybe just surprise that he was actually being honest. You mentioned staff. How many people work at Halverson Manor? 42. Have you paid them? Not fully. Not for months. How many months? Adrian's throat tightened. Some of them, 3 months, others longer. While you threw parties that cost 6 figures. Yes. That's... Miranda paused, choosing her words carefully. That's a choice. It's an indefensible choice. I can explain the thinking behind it, but I can't defend it. Explain it then. Adrian looked at the camera, at the faces he couldn't see but knew were watching. I thought if I could maintain appearances long enough, I'd find a way out. Get new investors, find a successful venture, something that would let me pay everyone back and fix everything. Every party was supposed to be networking, opportunities, connections that might lead somewhere. But all they led to was more debt and more lies. The comment section, visible on monitors off to the side, was exploding. Hundreds of comments per second, some sympathetic, many not. He admitted it, though. This is what privilege looks like when it fails. My landlord wouldn't let me defer rent for 3 days. At least he's being honest now. Honest? He's only talking because he got caught. Miranda glanced at the screens, then back at Adrian. Speaking of getting caught, David Chen at the Metropolitan Standard is publishing an investigation about you tonight. Why are you talking to me first instead of him? Because he wants to tell a story about a rich man who fell. I want to tell a story about a person who made terrible decisions and hurt people who trusted him. Those might sound like the same story, but they're not. Aren't they? One story is about schadenfreude. The other is about accountability. I can't control which one people believe, but I can control which one I tell. Miranda nodded slowly. Let's talk about accountability then. What happens to the people you owe money to? I've been liquidating assets. Yesterday, I transferred ownership of art, furniture, and vehicles to my groundskeeping staff to cover 3 months of back pay. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll be selling everything else, the estate, the cars, whatever has value, to pay creditors and remaining staff. Everything? Everything. Where will you live? Adrian almost laughed. I have no idea. You're giving up the manor? Your family has owned that property for 200 years. My family also trusted me to maintain it, and I failed. So, yes, it goes. The comment section shifted. Wait, he's actually selling everything? This feels different than I expected. Still doesn't fix what he did. No, but at least he's trying. Miranda leaned back. There's speculation that you've been approached by Maxwell Ashford with some kind of buyout offer. Can you confirm? Adrian hesitated. This was the part he hadn't decided how to handle. Maxwell's offer expired tomorrow. If he admitted it publicly, he'd lose leverage. But if he lied, everything else he'd said would become suspect. Yes, he said finally. Maxwell offered to buy out my holdings in exchange for paying off my debts and restructuring everything under his control. It would save my reputation but cost me any real ownership or independence. Are you taking it? No. Why not? Because it's not actually saving anything. It's just transferring the problem to someone who can hide it better. And I'm done hiding. Miranda studied him for a long moment. You realize what you're doing here, right? This interview is being watched by millions of people. By the time we're done, it'll be watched by tens of millions. You're making yourself unemployable in the circles you've spent your entire life operating in. No one in high society will touch you after this. I know. You'll be a pariah. Probably. So why do it? Adrian thought about his father's letters, about duty and responsibility and legacy, about Elena's exhausted face and the groundskeeper's anger, and 300 guests drinking champagne while his world collapsed. Because someone needs to say out loud that this whole system is broken, he said. The aristocracy, the old money, the networks that keep people like me insulated from consequences. It doesn't work anymore. Maybe it never did. But as long as we all keep pretending, nothing changes. So I'm stopping pretending. That's very noble. It's not noble. It's desperate. I'm out of options, out of money, and out of lies. This isn't courage. It's just finally being tired enough to tell the truth. Miranda glanced at her producer, who held up fingers indicating remaining time. 15 minutes before they'd planned to end. But the view count had hit 9 million and was climbing. Let's talk about consequences, Miranda said. Legal consequences. Are you facing charges? Potentially. Detectives visited me last night asking about the property developments, whether I knew about the permit violations, the bribery allegations. I told them I didn't know, which is true, but ignorance isn't exactly a defense. What happens if they charge you? I'll cooperate fully, answer questions, provide documentation, whatever they need. You could go to prison. Adrian felt ice in his stomach, but he kept his voice steady. Yes, I could. How does that feel? Terrifying, but also... He stopped, searching for the right words. Also maybe fair? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But I hurt people through negligence and pride and cowardice. If there are legal consequences for that, then there are consequences. The comment section had gone quieter. People were actually watching now, not just reacting. Miranda checked her tablet again. We're getting questions from viewers. One asks, what would you say to the contractors and staff members who haven't been paid? Adrian looked directly at the camera. I'm sorry. I know that's inadequate. I know sorry doesn't pay rent or feed families or fix the trust I broke, but it's true. I'm sorry for failing you, for lying to you, for putting my pride ahead of your livelihoods. You deserved better from me, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making whatever amends I can. Another question appeared on screen. Do you think you deserve forgiveness? No, Adrian said immediately. Forgiveness isn't something you deserve. It's something other people choose to give or not give. I can try to earn it, but I can't demand it. What's your plan now? Honestly, I don't have one. Sell everything, pay everyone I can, and then figure out how to exist in a world where I'm not Duke Adrian Halverson anymore. Just Adrian. Miranda let the silence sit for a moment. That's a different person. I hope so. Last question then. If you could go back 2 years, 3 years, whenever, what would you do differently? Adrian thought about it. Really thought about it. I'd stop trying to be my father. He knew how to maintain wealth in a world that doesn't exist anymore. I didn't. And instead of admitting that, I kept pretending I did, and it destroyed everything. So I'd go back and just be honest about not knowing. Ask for help. Accept that times change, and people have to change with them. Do you think other people in your position should be having this conversation? Yes, but they won't. Because right now they're watching this interview and thinking, that'll never be me, or I'm smarter than him, or I won't get caught. That's what I thought too. Miranda nodded slowly. Adrian Halverson, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for letting me tell the story my way. We're going to end the live stream now, but the full interview will remain available. For those just joining, you can watch from the beginning. This has been a Society Now exclusive. The red light clicked off. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Adrian slumped in his chair, adrenaline draining out of him all at once, leaving exhaustion in its wake. How bad was it? He asked. Miranda checked her tablet. 12 million viewers by the end, trending #1 on every platform. Comments are mixed. Some people think you're brave, some think you're pathetic, some think this was all calculated PR. It wasn't. I know, I was here. She stood, extended her hand. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Adrian shook her hand. That's probably the last time anyone says that to me for a while. Probably. He left the studio and walked into a world that had changed in the 90 minutes he'd been confessing. His phone was vibrating constantly. Texts, calls, notifications. He turned it off. The drive back to the manor felt surreal, like he was moving through someone else's life, someone who'd just admitted to millions of people that he was a failure, a liar, and possibly a criminal. When he arrived home, Elena was waiting in the entrance hall with Marcus. Both of them looked shell-shocked. We watched, Elena said. And you just nuked your entire social standing from orbit. I know. David Chen's article published 30 minutes ago. He's furious that you preempted him, called it a transparent attempt at reputation management. Is that what it was? Elena considered. I don't think so. I think it was self-destruction disguised as honesty. Same thing, maybe. Marcus cleared his throat. Your Grace, Adrian, the phones have been ringing nonstop. Media requests, creditors demanding immediate meetings, friends calling to... Well, I'm not sure if they're supporting you or distancing themselves. Both, probably. Maxwell Ashford called. He said your interview was the most spectacularly stupid thing he's ever witnessed, and his offer is officially withdrawn. Adrian felt a strange lightness. Good. Good? I didn't want it anyway. Elena handed him a tablet. You should see this. On screen was a statement from the Halverson Family Trust, a legal entity his father had established decades ago, managed by distant relatives Adrian rarely spoke to. The statement was brief, formal, and devastating. The Halverson Family Trust hereby severs all official ties with Adrian Halverson. His actions and admissions do not represent the values or standards of this family. Effective immediately, he is removed from all trust management positions and will receive no further support or association from the Halverson name. They disowned you, Marcus said quietly. In under 2 hours. Adrian read it twice. Then he handed the tablet back. Can't say I blame them. Adrian? Elena's voice was sharp. They just cut you off completely. No safety net, no family money, nothing. There was no family money left anyway. They're just making it official. How are you this calm? I'm not calm. I'm in shock. There's a difference. His phone, still turned off, stayed in his pocket. But Elena's phone rang. She answered, listened, went pale. When? She asked. Then, I understand. Thank you. She ended the call and looked at Adrian. That was Detective Morris. They're coming back. Tomorrow morning, with a warrant. Adrian's stomach dropped. For what? They didn't specify, but they want you to have legal representation present. I don't have a lawyer anymore. I couldn't pay the retainer. Then we find you one tonight. Marcus stepped forward. I know someone, a former prosecutor who went into defense work. She's expensive, but I can't afford expensive. She also takes cases pro bono sometimes. For clients who've been, Marcus searched for the word, honest about their situations. Set up a meeting. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Elena coordinated with the groundskeepers who arrived at 6 to select their assets. They moved through the manor like museum visitors, careful, slightly uncomfortable, picking paintings and sculptures and antique furniture with the help of an appraiser Elena had hired. James Pritchard stood in front of a Monet for a long time. My daughter's studying art history, he said to Adrian. She's written papers about this painting. Then take it, give it to her. Pritchard shook his head. Can't. It's worth too much. I'll take the Chagall instead. Smaller, easier to sell, still valuable. Whatever you think is fair. By 8 p.m., the selections were complete. 15 men left carrying pieces of Adrian's heritage, traded for wages he should have paid months ago. The lawyer arrived at 9. Her name was Sarah Chen. Apparently half the journalists and lawyers in the country shared that surname, and she was exactly what Marcus had promised, sharp, experienced, and brutally honest. I watched your interview, she said, as they sat in Adrian's study. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen a client do before retaining counsel. Probably stupid. Definitely stupid. You confessed to financial mismanagement, admitted to lying, and essentially painted a target on yourself for every creditor and prosecutor in the state. So you won't take me as a client? Sarah smiled slightly. I didn't say that. I said it was stupid. But it was also honest, and I prefer honest clients. They're easier to defend than liars. She pulled out a legal pad. Tell me everything the detectives asked about yesterday, and I mean everything. They talked for 3 hours. Sarah took notes, asked questions, occasionally muttered things like, that's problematic, or we can work with that. By midnight, she had a strategy. Here's the situation, she said. They're investigating potential fraud related to the property developments. Specifically, whether you knowingly invested in projects with illegal permits and falsified documentation. If they can prove you knew, that's criminal. If you didn't know but should have, that's civil liability, but probably not criminal charges. I didn't know. Can you prove you didn't know? I have emails showing I relied on advisors' assessments, documents showing I requested due diligence reports, but I never personally verified anything. That's negligence, not fraud. Negligence we can defend. The problem is, Sarah paused. The problem is your interview this morning. You admitted to lying, to covering things up, to maintaining false appearances. That doesn't help establish you as someone who is merely negligent. So I made things worse. You made things complicated, but not impossible. She closed her notepad. Tomorrow, when the detectives come, you say nothing. You let me talk. You answer only the questions I tell you to answer, and you never elaborate. Understood? Understood. And Adrian, no more public confessions without talking to me first. After Sarah left, Adrian wandered the manor. Rooms that had been full of furniture that morning were now empty. The groundskeepers had taken their selections, and everything looked hollow, echoey. He found Elena in the kitchen, drinking coffee that was probably her fourth or fifth cup of the day. You should sleep, he said. So should you. I won't. Too much happening. Elena gestured to the empty chair across from her. Adrian sat. That interview, Elena said. Miranda asked what your plan was, and you said you didn't have one. I don't. That's not true. You have a plan. It's just a plan for losing everything as publicly and completely as possible. That's not a plan. That's just what's happening. No, you're choosing it. You could have taken Maxwell's offer. You could have delayed the interview until you had better legal protection. You could have said less, revealed less, protected yourself more. But you didn't. Adrian stared at his hands. What's your point? My point is I need to know why, because I'm trying to decide whether to stay and help you through whatever comes next, or leave before it gets worse. The words hit harder than they should have. Elena had been the one constant through everything, the voice of reason, the person who kept anything functioning at all. The thought of losing her too was somehow worse than losing the manor or the title or his family's name. I don't know why, Adrian admitted. Maybe I'm tired of lying. Maybe I'm punishing myself. Maybe I just wanted to feel like I was in control of something, even if what I was controlling was my own destruction. That's not healthy. I'm aware. Elena drank her coffee. I'm staying. What? I'm staying. Not because I think you're making good decisions, but because someone needs to be here to pick up the pieces when this is over, and apparently that someone is me. Something loosened in Adrian's chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. When this gets worse, and it will get worse, you might regret having me around to say, I told you so. I'll take that risk. They sat in silence for a while, drinking terrible coffee in an empty kitchen, waiting for tomorrow to arrive with all its consequences. Adrian finally went to bed at 2 a.m. He didn't sleep, just lay in the dark thinking about his father, about legacy, about the interview that was probably still being dissected by millions of strangers. His phone, turned back on, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Evelyn Carter. Watched your interview. Brave or idiotic, haven't decided which. Either way, you've changed the story. Now it's not just about a duke who fell, it's about a man who jumped. That's more interesting. We should talk. Adrian didn't respond. He was done talking for now. At 6 a.m., he showered and dressed in the clothes Sarah had recommended. Presentable, but not expensive. The kind of outfit that said, taking this seriously without saying, still pretending to be rich. Sarah arrived at 7:30. Detectives will be here at 8. Remember, I do the talking unless I specifically tell you to answer, and a knock at the door interrupted her. Marcus opened it to reveal Detective Morris and Detective Chen, the actual detective, not the journalist, along with 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a suit who introduced herself as Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Walsh. Mr. Halverson, Morris said, holding up papers. We have a warrant to search the premises and seize financial documents related to your investment activities between 2022 and present. We also need you to come to the station for formal questioning. Sarah stepped forward. I'm his attorney. He'll cooperate fully with the search. As for questioning, we'll need to schedule that at a mutually convenient time. The warrant specifies immediate cooperation. The warrant specifies document seizure. Questioning can be scheduled. Morris looked at the ADA, who nodded slightly. Fine. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Don't be late. The officers spread through the manor, boxing up papers, hard drives, anything that might contain financial records. Adrian watched them take 2 years of his life and put it in evidence boxes. Elena stood beside him. This is really happening. Yes, they're going to find everything. Every lie, every hidden transfer, every desperate attempt to keep things afloat. I know. Adrian. She turned to face him. Are you going to prison? He thought about Sarah's assessment, about negligence versus fraud, about the difference between not knowing and not wanting to know. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe. The search took 4 hours. By noon, the detectives had filled 3 vans with evidence. Morris approached Adrian before leaving. For what it's worth, Morris said quietly, I saw your interview. My partner's wife watched the whole thing, made him watch it too. Most people in your position would have hired crisis managers and lawyers and said nothing. You didn't. Is that going to help me? Legally? Probably not. But it's something. Morris paused. You've got kids, Mr. Halverson? No. Well, if you did, that interview might be the kind of thing that teaches them something about owning your mistakes, even if it costs you everything. He left. Adrian stood in the entrance hall of his ransacked home, surrounded by empty rooms and empty boxes, with a lawyer who'd warned him he might go to prison and a friend who was staying only because someone had to. His phone buzzed. Not a call, a notification. David Chen's article had been updated with a new paragraph. Update. Following Adrian Halverson's unexpected live-stream confession this morning, questions have emerged about the timing and motivation behind his public statements. Sources close to the investigation suggest prosecutors were preparing charges before Halverson's interview, raising questions about whether his confession was an attempt to influence public perception ahead of potential criminal proceedings. The Duke declined to comment on these allegations. Of course he had. The narrative was shifting again, away from his control, turning his honesty into strategy, his confession into manipulation. Elena read over his shoulder. They're never going to let you just be honest, are they? There always has to be an angle. Maybe there is an angle. Maybe I'm lying to myself about why I did the interview. Are you? Adrian thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know anymore. Sarah rejoined them, looking grim. I just got off the phone with the ADA's office. They're considering charges. Multiple counts of fraud, possibly wire fraud, if they can prove false statements cross state lines. Best case scenario, you're looking at significant fines and restitution. Worst case, 8 to 10 years. The number hit like a physical blow. 8 to 10 years. When will they decide? Elena asked. Probably after Monday's questioning. They're building their case based on what they seized today. Adrian's phone rang. Unknown number again. He almost didn't answer, but something made him. Yes? Mr. Halverson, my name is Thomas Pritchard. I'm James Pritchard's brother. I'm also an attorney. Adrian's brain struggled to process. James from the groundskeeping staff? Yes. He told me what you did yesterday. The asset transfers. And then I watched your interview this morning. Okay. I'm calling because I specialize in bankruptcy law and asset protection. And from what I've seen, you're about to get destroyed in court unless someone helps you structure what's left of your finances in a way that protects you from the worst outcomes. I can't afford. I'm not asking for payment. I'm offering to help because my brother worked for you for 12 years. And despite everything, despite the delayed payments and the mess you've made, you gave him a Chagall painting yesterday to make things right. That means something. Adrian felt something crack. Not breaking, but opening. A small kindness being returned when he deserved nothing. I don't understand, he managed. You don't have to. Just meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m. We'll go through everything and figure out how to keep you from losing absolutely everything. But you just said, I said you'd lose almost everything. Almost isn't the same as absolutely. There's usually something that can be saved. We just have to find it before the prosecutors and creditors take it all. The call ended. Adrian stood in his empty hallway, holding a phone that kept bringing both disasters and unexpected small mercies, with no idea which the next call would bring. Who was that? Elena asked. James Pritchard's brother, a bankruptcy lawyer. He wants to help. Why? Because I gave James a painting yesterday. Elena shook her head slowly. So you're being saved by the people you failed the worst. I don't even know what that is. Undeserved, Adrian said quietly. Maybe. Or maybe it's just people recognizing that you're actually trying to make things right, even if you're doing it messily. Sarah checked her watch. I need to go prepare for Monday's questioning, but Adrian, She waited until he met her eyes. Whatever happens in that interrogation room, whatever they find in those documents, whatever charges they bring, the fact that you admitted fault publicly before they forced you to, that matters. It might not matter legally, but it matters. Don't forget that. After she left, Adrian and Elena stood in the echoing hallway, surrounded by the wreckage of a life that had taken generations to build and 2 years to destroy. "What do we do now?" Elena asked. Adrian looked at the empty walls where paintings had hung, at the spaces where furniture had stood, at the manor that would soon belong to someone else. "Now," he said, "we wait for Monday and see if honesty was enough, or if it was just the last lie I told myself before everything ended." His phone buzzed one more time, a text from Miranda. 16 million views, fastest growing story of the year. "You've started something, Adrian?" People are asking if other wealthy families are hiding the same problems. Senators are getting questions. The conversation is changing. Whatever happens to you next, you change the conversation. That's not nothing. Adrian read it 3 times, then put his phone away. Outside, the sun was setting on a Saturday that had lasted approximately 17 years. Tomorrow would bring more consequences, more fallout, more judgment. But tonight, standing in his empty house with the one person who'd chosen to stay, Adrian Halverson allowed himself to feel something that might have been relief, or might have been terror, or might have been both. The illusion was gone. The performance had ended. The carefully constructed narrative had collapsed completely. And somehow, impossibly, he was still standing, for now. Monday morning arrived like a sentencing. Adrian stood in front of the mirror at 5 a.m., adjusting a tie he'd borrowed from Marcus, because he'd sold all his expensive ones weeks ago. The face staring back at him looked different than it had a week ago. Older, maybe, or just more honest. The exhaustion hadn't faded, but something else had appeared beneath it. Something that might have been acceptance. Sarah arrived at 7 with coffee and a briefcase full of documents. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." She handed him the coffee. "Remember the rules. I answer most questions. You answer only what I tell you to answer. You don't elaborate, don't volunteer information, don't try to explain or justify. Simple, direct responses." "What if they ask about the interview?" "Then I'll argue it's not relevant to the investigation. If they push, you say you were being honest about your financial situation, and leave it at that." Elena appeared in the doorway, still in yesterday's clothes. She probably hadn't slept either. "The bankruptcy lawyer called. Thomas Pritchard. He wants to meet tomorrow instead of today. Something about filing paperwork that needs to be done first." "Did he say what kind of paperwork?" "No. Just that it would help protect certain assets from seizure." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "What assets? I thought you'd liquidated everything." "Almost everything," Adrian said. "There are a few things left, personal items, some family heirlooms that aren't worth enough to bother selling but have sentimental value." "Like what?" "My mother's wedding ring, my father's watch, letters, photographs, things like that." Sarah nodded slowly. "Those might actually matter. If Pritchard can establish them as protected personal property rather than assets available to creditors, you at least keep something." "I don't care about keeping things." "You should. When this is over, however it ends, you're going to need something to remind you that you existed before all of this. Trust me on that." They left for the police station at 8:15. The drive took 20 minutes through morning traffic that felt surreal in its normalcy. People going to work, drinking coffee, listening to music, living regular lives while Adrian drove toward possible criminal charges. The station was gray concrete and fluorescent lighting. Detective Morris met them at the entrance. "Mr. Halverson, Miss Chen, follow me." The interrogation room was exactly what Adrian expected from television. Small, windowless, a metal table bolted to the floor, chairs that looked uncomfortable because they were. Morris and his partner took seats across from Adrian and Sarah. A camera in the corner recorded everything. ADA Rebecca Walsh entered last, carrying a laptop and 3 folders thick with documents. "Let's begin," she said, opening the first folder. "Mr. Halverson, you admitted in your public interview Saturday that you invested approximately $53 million in various ventures that subsequently failed. Is that accurate?" Sarah leaned forward. "My client was speaking broadly about his financial situation. The specific amounts and details would require review of documentation." We have the documentation, seized from his residence Saturday. Walsh pulled out bank statements. Bulgarian property development. Partnership agreement signed March 2022. Initial investment, $12 million, correct? Adrian looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly. Yes, Adrian said. The partnership agreement includes clauses about due diligence and verification of legal permits. Did you verify that the Bulgarian permits were legitimate? I relied on my advisors to conduct that verification. But you personally didn't verify? No. Walsh made a note. Romanian development. $8 million invested June 2022. Same question. Did you personally verify the legality of the permits and construction approvals? No, I relied on advisors. Spanish coastal development. $15 million. September 2022. Personal verification? No. Walsh sat back. So you invested $35 million in 3 separate international projects without personally verifying any of the legal documentation? Sarah interjected. That's a mischaracterization. My client hired qualified professionals to conduct due diligence. That's standard practice for investments of this scale. Except the qualified professionals were actually consultants paid by the development companies themselves. They had financial incentive to approve the projects regardless of legitimacy. Adrian's stomach dropped. I didn't know that. You didn't know? Walsh's tone sharpened. Or you didn't want to know? I didn't know. Let me show you something. Walsh opened her laptop, turned it toward Adrian. An email chain from 2022. Adrian's address at the top. Responses from someone named Richard Voss, one of his former financial advisors. The email from Voss read, "These consultants are recommended by the development partners. Their reports will be favorable. If you want independent verification, we'll need to hire separate firms, which will add 60 to 90 days to the timeline and could cost $200,000. Adrian's response, 2 hours later. Timeline is more important. Proceed with recommended consultants. Walsh waited. Does that refresh your memory? Adrian felt sick. I remember that email. So you chose speed over due diligence. I chose to trust the people I'd hired to give me good advice. You chose to ignore a clear warning that the consultants might not be independent. Sarah cut in. This email shows my client was informed about the verification process and made a decision based on professional recommendations. That's not fraud. That's, at worst, poor judgment. Poor judgment that affected dozens of contractors who weren't paid, workers who lost jobs, and investors who trusted Mr. Halverson's reputation, which my client has publicly acknowledged and taken responsibility for. Walsh closed the laptop. Let's talk about the interview. That was strategic, wasn't it? Get ahead of our investigation, control the narrative, generate public sympathy before charges were filed? Adrian answered before Sarah could stop him. No. Walsh raised an eyebrow. No. It wasn't strategic. It was desperate. I knew you were investigating. I knew David Chen was publishing. I was out of options and out of time, and I didn't want the first version of this story to be someone else's. So you confessed publicly to influence potential jurors. I confessed publicly because I was tired of lying. Sarah touched his arm, a warning to stop talking. But Adrian couldn't stop now. You want to know if I'm a criminal? He continued. I don't know. I made terrible decisions. I trusted the wrong people. I prioritized appearance over reality. I hurt people who relied on me. Whether that's legally criminal or just morally bankrupt, I honestly don't know. But I'm done pretending I didn't do it. The room was silent. Walsh studied him. You understand that confession doesn't protect you from prosecution? Yes. And that this interview is being recorded and can be used as evidence? Yes. And you're still choosing to speak openly rather than invoking your right to remain silent? Sarah jumped in. My client is choosing to cooperate with your investigation while maintaining his innocence of criminal intent. Is that what he's doing? Walsh looked at Adrian. Or is he just tired? Both, Adrian said quietly. Walsh closed her folders. Here's where we are. Based on the evidence we've collected, we believe you were negligent in your investment practices. We believe you failed to exercise proper oversight. We believe you prioritized your reputation over the well-being of people who trusted you. What we don't have, yet, is clear evidence of criminal fraud. The line between catastrophic incompetence and intentional deception is narrow, but it exists. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Not relief. Not yet. But the first small crack in the certainty that he was going to prison. What does that mean? Sarah asked. It means we're not filing criminal charges today, but the investigation remains open. If we find evidence that Mr. Halverson knowingly participated in fraudulent activities, we'll revisit that decision. Walsh stood. You're free to go, for now. Outside, the morning had turned bright and cold. Adrian stood on the station steps, breathing air that somehow tasted different than it had 2 hours ago. That went better than expected, Sarah said. Did it? You're not under arrest. That's significantly better than expected. Adrian's phone buzzed, multiple messages coming through at once. Elena. How did it go? Thomas Pritchard. Need to meet today. Found something important in the bankruptcy filings. And then one from a number he didn't recognize. This is James Pritchard. My brother says you're not going to jail. That true? Adrian typed back to James. Not today, at least. The response came immediately. Good, because you have a problem at the manor. Staff meeting in 2 hours. You need to be there. Sarah dropped him back at the estate at 11. Cars filled the driveway. More than should have been there. Staff vehicles, plus others Adrian didn't recognize. Marcus met him at the door looking agitated. Your Grace, Adrian, we have a situation. What kind of situation? The staff. They've organized. They want to talk to you about what happens next. Adrian followed Marcus to the main drawing room, now empty of furniture except for folding chairs someone had brought in. 42 staff members sat in those chairs. The groundskeepers, the kitchen staff, the housekeepers, the drivers. Everyone who'd worked for him, including the ones he hadn't paid properly in months. James Pritchard stood at the front. When Adrian entered, the room went quiet. Thank you for coming, James said, his tone formal. We asked for this meeting because we need clarity about the future of this estate and our employment. Adrian moved to the front of the room. I understand, and I owe you more than clarity. I owe you money, stability, and honesty I should have given months ago. We watched your interview, someone called out from the back. Sarah Chen, one of the housekeepers. You said you're selling everything. Yes. What happens to us? Adrian took a breath. I can't lie to you anymore. The manor is being sold to pay creditors. I don't know when or to whom, but it's happening. Once the sale goes through, employment decisions will be up to the new owner. I have no control over that. Murmurs rippled through the room. Fear, anger, resignation. However, Adrian continued, I'm working with a bankruptcy attorney to structure the sale in a way that prioritizes staff severance and remaining wages. You'll be paid before other creditors. That's not negotiable for me. What about references? Marcus asked. Will we be able to get recommendations for future employment? Yes. I'll provide honest references to anyone who wants them. And if my name is too damaged to be useful, I'll connect you with other people in my network who might actually help. What network? Someone muttered. You're blacklisted everywhere. Adrian couldn't argue with that. Elena stood from her chair. I have something to say. All eyes turned to her. I've been Adrian's estate manager for 6 years. I've watched him make mistakes, lots of them. I've also watched him try to fix those mistakes in ways that cost him personally. The asset transfers to the groundskeepers? That wasn't strategic. That was him trying to make things right the only way he had left. She paused. I don't know what happens to this place. But I know that if you need employment references or connections or help finding new positions, I'll do everything I can to assist. That's not dependent on Adrian's reputation or mine. That's just what's right. James Pritchard nodded slowly. We appreciate that. But we need more than promises. We need a plan. Adrian glanced at Elena, who gave the smallest nod of encouragement. Then here's what I'm proposing, Adrian said. Thomas Pritchard, James's brother, is helping me structure the bankruptcy to prioritize employee compensation. Elena will work with him to ensure every person in this room gets what they're owed, plus severance based on years of service. That's going to take time, probably weeks, but it's happening. What are you getting out of this? Someone asked. Nothing. I'll have nothing left once this is done. Then why do it? Because it's what I should have done from the beginning. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then James stood. Here's what I'm proposing, he said, looking at Adrian. We don't abandon this place until it's sold. We keep it running, keep it maintained, show potential buyers that this estate is worth investing in. Because the better the sale price, the more money there is for all of us, including you. Adrian blinked. You want to help me get a better sale price? We want to help ourselves get properly compensated. If that means helping you maintain this property's value until it sells, then that's what we do. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. But we have conditions, James continued. Full transparency about the sale process, weekly meetings to update everyone on progress. And Elena manages the day-to-day operations, not you. Adrian looked at Elena, who seemed as surprised as he was. Why not me? Adrian asked. Because you're radioactive right now, James said bluntly. Your name on anything makes it worth less, not more. Elena's got a good reputation. She's the one who actually kept this place running while you were throwing parties. Let her be the face of the estate until it sells. Adrian felt something twist in his chest. Not quite humiliation, but close. Also recognition that James was absolutely right. Agreed, he said. One more thing, Sarah Chen, the housekeeper, spoke up. That interview you did? People keep calling here asking if they can interview staff about what it was like working for you. We've been saying no because we didn't know what you wanted. But maybe we should say yes. Why would you do that? Because your interview changed the conversation. Now people are asking questions about how many other wealthy families are treating staff like this. If we talk about our experience, the good and the bad, maybe something actually changes. Adrian felt the room shift. Something was happening here that he hadn't anticipated. His staff wasn't abandoning him, or demanding immediate payment, or threatening legal action. They were organizing, strategizing, taking control of a situation he'd created through his failures. If you want to talk to journalists, you should, Adrian said. I won't stop you or influence what you say. Tell them the truth. Even if the truth makes you look worse? Especially then. The meeting continued for another hour. Plans were made, responsibilities divided. Elena would handle estate operations. Marcus would coordinate with potential buyers. Thomas Pritchard would manage the bankruptcy proceedings, and Adrian would stay out of the way unless specifically needed. After everyone dispersed, James approached him. That wasn't easy for you, James said, hearing that your name makes things worth less. It's true, though. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. James paused. My brother wants to meet with you at 3. He says he found something in the bankruptcy filings that could change things. Change them how? He wouldn't tell me. Said it's confidential attorney-client stuff. Adrian checked his watch. 2 hours. He spent that time walking the manor grounds, looking at gardens that would soon belong to someone else. The fountain his great-grandfather had commissioned, the hedge maze his mother had loved, the terrace where he'd hosted hundreds of guests who'd stopped calling the moment his reputation cracked. At 3, Thomas Pritchard arrived, tall, mid-40s, with James's same no-nonsense demeanor but dressed in a lawyer suit. They sat in Adrian's study, now empty except for a desk and 2 chairs. I've been reviewing your financial records, Thomas said, pulling documents from his briefcase. Everything the police seized, everything you've provided, plus public filings. And I found something interesting. What? The pharmaceutical investment, the one where 4 people died in clinical trials. You invested $18 million. The company went bankrupt. You lost everything. Standard investment failure. Yes, what about it? Except it wasn't a complete failure. The company's assets were liquidated in bankruptcy proceedings, including intellectual property. The research data, the drug formulations, everything. Those assets were purchased by a larger pharmaceutical company for $42 million. Adrian frowned. I don't understand. If the assets sold for $42 million, where did that money go? That's the interesting part. According to bankruptcy law, secured creditors get paid first, then unsecured creditors, then investors. Except in this case, the bankruptcy was structured in a way that classified certain debts as secured when they should have been unsecured. Those creditors got paid in full. The unsecured creditors, including you, got nothing. That's fraud. Yes, but it's fraud perpetrated against you, not by you. Thomas pulled out more documents. I filed a motion this morning to reopen the pharmaceutical company's bankruptcy proceedings. If successful, the court would restructure the distribution of that $42 million. As a major investor, you'd be entitled to a substantial portion. Adrian felt dizzy. How substantial? Conservatively, $6 to $8 million, possibly more. That's Adrian couldn't finish the sentence. $6 million wouldn't solve everything, but it would pay his staff, cover his debts, maybe leave him with something more than nothing. Don't celebrate yet, Thomas warned. This is complicated. The companies that benefited from the fraudulent bankruptcy structure will fight it. This could take months, maybe years, and there's no guarantee we win. But there's a chance? There's a chance. Adrian sat back trying to process. A week ago, he'd had nothing. He'd confessed to millions of people that he was broke, probably going to prison, definitely a failure. And now there was a chance at recovery? At making things right? Why didn't anyone find this before? Adrian asked. Because nobody looked. You accepted the loss as part of the broader failure. Your advisors didn't dig deeper because they'd moved on to other clients. The police were investigating you, not investigating on your behalf. It took someone specifically looking for assets that could be recovered to find it. And you did that because James asked you to. I did it because it's my job. But yes, James asked me to. Thomas gathered his documents. Here's what happens next. I file the motion. The court schedules hearings. You'll need to testify about your original investment, what you were told, what due diligence was performed. It'll be scrutinized. But if we can prove the bankruptcy was fraudulently structured, you have a legitimate claim. After Thomas left, Adrian sat alone in his study, staring at documents that represented the first real hope he'd felt in 2 years. His phone buzzed. A text from Miranda Chen. Breaking news. 3 senators are calling for investigations into aristocratic financial practices. Your interview sparked a congressional inquiry. Thought you should know. Then another text, this one from Evelyn Carter. My follow-up piece publishes tomorrow. Fair warning, it's not all flattering, but it's honest. That's what you wanted, right? And finally, one from Elena. 2 potential buyers viewing the estate tomorrow. One is a hotel developer. The other is a historical preservation society. Come to the meetings. Your input matters. Adrian read that last one twice. His input mattered. Not his control, not his decision, but his input. It was such a small thing, but after a week of being sidelined from his own life, it felt significant. That evening, the remaining staff gathered for dinner in the kitchen, something that had never happened when Adrian was maintaining appearances. Kitchen staff, groundskeepers, Elena, Marcus, even Sarah Chen, who'd stayed late finishing inventory. Someone had cooked pasta. Someone else brought bread. It was simple, chaotic, nothing like the formal dinners Adrian had hosted in the main dining hall. James Pritchard raised a glass of cheap wine. To uncertainty. That's a terrible toast, Marcus said. It's an honest toast. We're all uncertain about what happens next, but we're facing it together. That's worth acknowledging. Everyone drank. Adrian sat at the end of the table, watching people who'd had every reason to abandon him choosing instead to stay, to help, to give him chances he probably didn't deserve. Can I say something? He asked. The table quieted. I spent my entire life believing that legacy meant maintaining what came before, that being a good duke meant preserving the manor, the title, the appearance of power. I thought if I could just hold on long enough, find the right investments, make the right moves, everything would be okay. Basin Sots. He paused. I was wrong about all of it. Legacy isn't about preserving the past. It's about being honest enough in the present that people might actually trust you in the future. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to figure that out. Elena spoke first. Are you done with the self-flagellation speeches? Adrian blinked. What? Because they're getting old. We get it. You failed. You're sorry. You're trying to make it right. We've established this. She leaned forward. What matters now is whether you're going to keep wallowing or actually help us figure out what comes next. I'm trying to help. Then stop apologizing and start planning. Thomas thinks he can recover millions. The staff is willing to maintain the estate until it sells. You've got 2 potential buyers tomorrow. This isn't the end of your story. It's barely the middle. So stop acting like you're attending your own funeral and start acting like someone who might actually have a future. The table was silent. Then James started laughing. What? Elena demanded. Nothing. Just, that's the most Elena thing I've ever heard. He looked at Adrian. She's right, though. You did your big confession. You took responsibility. Now do something with it. Adrian felt something shift. Not quite hope, but close. Maybe possibility. Okay, he said. What should I do? Tomorrow's buyer meetings, Marcus suggested. Prepare for them. Know what you want this place to become, what matters about its history, what should be preserved. Because whoever buys it is going to ask what makes this estate special, and it's been in my family for 2 centuries isn't enough anymore. The Historical Preservation Society, Sarah Chen added. They might actually care about maintaining the character of the place. But you'd need to convince them it's worth preserving. That means telling them the actual history, not just the glossy version. What's the actual history? Someone asked. Adrian thought about it, really thought about it. My great-great-grandfather built the original manor with money from shipping contracts during wartime. Morally questionable but legal. His son expanded it using profits from textile manufacturing that definitely exploited workers. My grandfather modernized everything with money from investments that were smart but ruthless. My father maintained it by being better at business than he was at being a person. He paused, and I nearly destroyed it by being neither smart nor ruthless, just desperate and dishonest. That's more honest than most historical estates would admit, Elena said. It's also more interesting, James added. The Preservation Society wants stories, not sanitized history. Give them complexity. They'll respect that. The conversation continued, practical planning mixed with unexpected laughter. At some point, someone opened another bottle of wine. Someone else found cookies in the pantry. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't what Adrian's father would have approved of, but it was real. Adrian's phone buzzed again. A news alert. Halverson interview sparks wave of financial confessions. 3 prominent families admit similar struggles. He showed it to Elena. You started something, she said quietly. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's all it takes. By midnight, people started heading home or to their quarters. Adrian helped clean up. Actually helped. Loading dishes into the dishwasher, wiping down counters, tasks he'd never done in his own house before. James was the last to leave. He paused at the kitchen door. My brother's motion to reopen the bankruptcy, he said. You know there's a chance it doesn't work, right? That you could end up with nothing again? I know. And you're okay with that? Adrian considered. I have to be. Hope is dangerous when you're in free fall, but I think I'm done falling now. Whether I land with something or nothing, at least I'm landing. James nodded. For what it's worth, I think you might land better than you expect. Not because you deserve it, but because you're finally being honest about what you don't deserve. After he left, Adrian walked through the empty manor one more time, past rooms that echoed now, past walls where paintings had hung, past the ballroom where he'd hosted his last desperate party just days ago. He ended up in his father's old study, where a single photograph remained on the desk. His parents on their wedding day, young and hopeful, and completely unaware of what their son would do to their legacy. I'm sorry, Adrian said to the photograph. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed me to be. But even as he said it, he realized the apology felt different now. Not weighted with shame, but just honest. An acknowledgement of failure without the crushing need for forgiveness. His phone lit up with one final message. From Sarah Chen, his lawyer. A.D. A Walsh called. They're officially closing the criminal investigation. No charges. You're clear. Congratulations on not going to prison. Adrian read it 3 times. He wasn't going to prison. Thomas might recover millions. The staff was helping save the estate. Other families were being honest about their struggles because he'd been honest first. None of it fixed what he'd broken. None of it erased the failures or the people he'd hurt or the legacy he'd destroyed. But it was something, maybe even something he could build on. Outside, dawn was still hours away. But for the first time in 2 years, Adrian Halverson went to sleep believing he might actually wake up to a future that wasn't just about surviving his past. 3 months later, Adrian stood in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale air, watching a judge review documents that could either restore a fraction of his life or confirm that hope had been a mistake all along. Thomas Pritchard sat beside him, papers spread across the defense table. Across the aisle, lawyers representing the pharmaceutical companies that had benefited from the fraudulent bankruptcy wore expressions that suggested this was merely an inconvenience. Judge Martha Hendricks, 60-something with silver hair, and the kind of face that had seen every manipulation humans could devise, looked up from the final document. Mr. Pritchard, she said, Your motion to reopen the bankruptcy proceedings is granted. The distribution of assets from the pharmaceutical company's liquidation was demonstrably fraudulent. The court finds that certain creditors were improperly classified as secured when they should have been unsecured, resulting in improper distribution of funds. One of the opposing lawyers stood. Your Honor, we'd like to request— I'm not finished. Judge Hendrick's tone could have frozen water. The court further finds that Mr. Halverson, as a major investor who conducted reasonable due diligence given the information available at the time, is entitled to compensation from the improperly distributed funds. The exact amount will be determined in subsequent proceedings, but preliminary calculations suggest approximately $7.2 million, plus interest accrued since the original bankruptcy filing. Adrian felt the air leave his lungs. $7.2 million. It wasn't $53 million. It wasn't what he'd lost, but it was enough to pay every person he owed, with something left over. This court is adjourned, Judge Hendrick said, her gavel falling with finality. Thomas turned to Adrian, a rare smile breaking through his professional demeanor. We won. We won, Adrian repeated, the words not quite feeling real yet. Outside the courthouse, Elena was waiting with Marcus. They'd both taken the day off from managing the estate, which still hadn't sold, despite 3 months of viewings, to be there. Well? Elena asked, though Adrian's expression probably already told her everything. $7.2 million. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Thank God. That's enough, Marcus said, doing rapid mental calculations. That's enough for everyone. All the staff, all the creditors, everything. And then some, Thomas added. After distribution to creditors and staff compensation, you'll have approximately $1.4 million remaining. Not enough to keep the manor, but enough to rebuild something. Adrian sat down on the courthouse steps, suddenly exhausted. When do we get the money? The actual distribution takes time, probably 6 to 8 weeks for processing. But I can file documentation today showing that funds are secured. That stops any remaining legal actions against you and establishes that you can fulfill your obligations. Do it. Thomas nodded and headed back inside to file paperwork. Adrian sat in silence, watching traffic pass. 3 months ago, he'd confessed to millions of people that he was bankrupt. He'd expected to lose everything, the manor, his reputation, possibly his freedom. Instead, he'd lost most of it but gained something unexpected, clarity about what actually mattered. You're being quiet, Elena observed, sitting beside him. I'm processing. Process out loud. Adrian laughed, an actual laugh that felt rusty but genuine. I'm thinking about how strange this is. Losing $50 million destroyed me. Recovering $7 million feels like winning the lottery. The numbers don't make sense. The numbers never made sense, Marcus said. You were never actually worth $50 million in any meaningful way. That was just accumulated wealth you inherited and then gambled away. The $7 million is different. It's money you fought for, that you earned through honesty and persistence. That makes it more valuable than anything you had before. That's very philosophical for a Monday morning. I've been reading self-help books. Elena's been forcing me. Elena shrugged. Everyone needs therapy. Books are cheaper. They sat together on the courthouse steps for another 20 minutes, watching the city wake up around them before heading back to the manor for the meeting that would change everything. The staff had gathered in the main hall, all 42 of them, plus Thomas Pritchard's entire law team, plus the representatives from the Historical Preservation Society, who'd been the most serious potential buyers over the past 3 months. Adrian stood at the front, Elena beside him, and looked at faces that had become familiar in a way they'd never been when he was just their employer. We won the motion, he said without preamble. $7.2 million will be distributed over the next 2 months. Every person in this room who is owed back pay or severance will receive full compensation, with interest. The room erupted. Relief. Celebration. People hugging each other. James Pritchard had tears in his eyes that he didn't bother hiding. Adrian waited for the noise to settle. There's more. Because of the secured funds, Thomas has negotiated a settlement structure that pays creditors over time rather than requiring immediate liquidation of the estate. Which means, he looked at the Preservation Society representatives, which means we have options that didn't exist yesterday. Margaret Wells, the lead representative from the Historical Preservation Alliance, stepped forward. She was in her 50s, passionate about architecture and history in a way that felt genuine rather than academic. Mr. Halverson, she said, When we first toured this estate 3 months ago, you told us the real history of your family, not the sanitized version. The wartime profiteering, the labor exploitation, all of it. That honesty was refreshing. It was also necessary. Yes, and it's why we're still interested, even though you're not the toxic asset you were 3 months ago. She smiled slightly. Our board met last night. We're prepared to make an offer. $5.8 million for the manor and grounds, with the condition that certain historical features are maintained and that the estate is open to the public for educational purposes. Adrian felt something in his chest loosen. That's less than the hotel developer offered. I know, but the hotel developer wants to gut the interior and turn it into a luxury resort. We want to preserve it as a historical site that teaches people about the complexity of wealth, legacy, and what happens when both are mismanaged. Your story included. My story? Margaret nodded. The Alliance wants to create an exhibition about the rise and fall of aristocratic families in the modern era. This estate would be the centerpiece. Your family's history, the full history, including your recent collapse and recovery, would be part of the narrative. It would be honest, unflattering in places, but educational. Adrian looked at Elena, who raised an eyebrow. Your legacy as a cautionary tale. Thoughts? I think it's perfect, Adrian said quietly. He turned back to Margaret. I accept your offer. On one condition. What condition? The staff, everyone in this room, gets priority consideration for employment positions once the estate becomes a historical site. Tour guides, maintenance, administration. Whatever positions exist, they get first opportunity. Margaret consulted with her colleagues, then nodded. Agreed. We'll need people who actually know this place and its history. Who better than the people who kept it running? The room erupted again, this time with a different kind of emotion. Not just relief, but possibility. James Pritchard approached Adrian as the crowd dispersed into smaller conversations. You just made yourself homeless to save our jobs. The math works out. After creditors and staff compensation and the estate sale, I'll have about $2.6 million left. That's enough to buy a regular house, start something new. Something new like what? Adrian realized he had no idea. For the first time in his life, he had no plan, no inherited path, no title to define him. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm okay with not knowing. James studied him. You're different than you were 3 months ago. I'd hope so. Otherwise, this was all for nothing. Over the next 6 weeks, the estate transformed. The Preservation Society began preliminary work, documenting the architecture, cataloging the remaining artifacts, planning the exhibitions that would tell the manor's complicated history. Adrian spent those weeks in transition, packing his personal belongings, which fit into 3 boxes, surprisingly. Meeting with Thomas to finalize financial distributions. Watching as staff members received their back pay and severance, seeing faces that had been tense with worry finally relax. Elena had been offered a position as operations director for the historical site. Marcus had decided to take his severance and open a small consulting business for estate management. James Pritchard had accepted a position as head groundskeeper for the Preservation Society with a significant raise. Everyone was landing somewhere. Adrian was still figuring out where that was. The final staff gathering happened on a Thursday evening in June. The Preservation Society had bought pizza, actual pizza, not catered elegant food, and everyone sat in the gardens eating from paper plates. This feels like an ending, Sarah Chen, the housekeeper, said, looking around at the manor lit up against the twilight. It is an ending, Elena agreed, but also a beginning. This place gets to become something that actually matters, instead of just being expensive wallpaper for rich people's parties. What about you? Marcus asked Adrian. Where are you going? I bought a small house in the city, 2 bedrooms, normal neighborhood. I'm still figuring out what comes next. And the title? Duke Adrian Halverson? Adrian shrugged. The family trust revoked my association with the Halverson name. The title is just a word now. No power, no money, no meaning. So I'm just Adrian, regular person figuring out how to be regular. That's going to be weird for you, James observed. Everything's weird now. Might as well embrace it. Evelyn Carter's follow-up article had published 2 months ago, a long-form piece about Adrian's collapse, confession, and the wave of financial honesty it had sparked among other wealthy families. It had been fair, thorough, and not particularly flattering, but it had been accurate, which was all Adrian had asked for. The article's final paragraph had stuck with him. Adrian Halverson may have failed as a duke, but his failure succeeded in exposing a system built on illusion. Whether his personal redemption matters less than the conversation he started is a question each reader must answer for themselves. Miranda's platform had hit 20 million subscribers. She'd built an entire series around financial transparency, featuring interviews with people from various economic backgrounds talking honestly about money, failure, and recovery. The congressional inquiry Adrian's confession had sparked was still ongoing. 3 senators had introduced legislation requiring greater financial disclosure from families holding historical titles and estates that received tax benefits. None of it solved everything, but it was movement, change, honesty forcing itself into spaces that had been carefully constructed lies for generations. As the evening wound down and people started heading home, Elena pulled Adrian aside. "I have something for you," she said, handing him an envelope. Inside was a check for $43,000. "What is this?" "The staff pooled money, your severance. You paid everyone else, but you didn't pay yourself." "Elena, I can't." "You can and you will. You worked here too. You did the job badly in some ways, and surprisingly well in others, but you worked. So take the severance." Adrian stared at the check. "This is too much." "It's exactly the right amount. We calculated it based on your years of service, same formula everyone else got." She paused. "Also, I'm buying you dinner next week. Real dinner, at a restaurant. We're going to talk about what you're doing with the rest of your life." "I don't know what I'm doing." "Then we'll figure it out together. That's what friends do." The word friends hit Adrian unexpectedly. When was the last time he'd had an actual friend instead of just useful connections? "Thank you," he managed. "You're welcome. Now go mingle. This is your last party at the manor. Try to enjoy it." Adrian walked through the gardens one more time, listening to conversations and laughter. People who'd been strangers when this started had become a community through shared crisis and shared survival. His phone buzzed. A text from Thomas Pritchard. "Final numbers are in. After all distributions, you'll have $2,847,000 remaining. Not bad for someone who was bankrupt 3 months ago." Another text, this one from Sarah Chen, his lawyer. 3 interview requests came in today. A podcast about financial recovery, a university that wants you to speak to business students, and a documentary about wealth inequality. Want me to forward them? Adrian typed back. Forward the university. Decline the others for now. He wasn't ready to be a spokesperson or a symbol. But talking to students about failure, about what happens when you inherit something you don't know how to maintain, that felt manageable. Useful, even. As night fell completely, someone started a fire in one of the garden fire pits. People gathered around it talking and laughing like they were at a regular party instead of the wake for a dying estate. Adrian stood at the edge of the circle, watching flames cast flickering light on faces he'd grown to actually know over the past 3 months. "You should sit," James said, gesturing to an empty chair beside the fire. Adrian sat. "What's it feel like?" someone asked. "Knowing this is all ending." Adrian thought about it. "Like letting go of something I was holding too tight. It hurt at first, but now my hands don't ache anymore." "That's either very wise or very corny," Marcus said. "Probably both." They sat around the fire until past midnight, telling stories about the manor, the disasters, the close calls, the moments that had seemed catastrophic at the time, but were funny now. Adrian contributed his own stories, moments from before the collapse, when he'd been so focused on maintaining appearances that he'd missed what was actually happening around him. "Remember the winter gala 2 years ago?" Elena said, "when the ice sculpture melted faster than expected and flooded the ballroom?" "I spent $40,000 on that sculpture," Adrian recalled, "and I spent 6 hours coordinating cleanup while you networked with guests who didn't even notice the flood. That probably should have been a sign I had my priorities wrong." "You think?" Everyone laughed, but it was gentle laughter. Not cruel, just acknowledgement of how absurd it all had been. Eventually, people started leaving. Final goodbyes, promises to stay in touch, plans made for future gatherings that might or might not happen. Elena was the last to leave. She stood with Adrian on the front steps, looking at the manor one final time. "It's going to be strange," she said, "not working here anymore. You'll still be here, just as operations director instead of estate manager." "It's not the same. The Preservation Society owns it now. It's not ours." It was never really ours. We just pretended it was. Elena smiled. Look at you, being philosophical. Failure makes you philosophical, or insane. I'm still determining which. She hugged him, quick, genuine. See you next week for dinner. Don't cancel. I won't. After she left, Adrian walked through the manor alone. Every room empty now, furniture sold or donated or claimed by staff members. Just bare walls and empty spaces that echoed when he walked. He ended up in his father's study, where he'd spent so much time trying to figure out how to maintain something that was already slipping away. The photograph of his parents was gone, packed in one of his 3 boxes. But he could still picture it. His phone rang. Unknown number, which he normally ignored, but something made him answer. Adrian Halverson? Yes? This is David Chen from the Metropolitan Standard. We spoke 3 months ago. Adrian felt tension creep into his shoulders. I remember. I'm calling because I owe you an apology. My article about your financial collapse was accurate, but it was also cynical. I assumed your confession interview was strategic manipulation. I said as much in print. It's fine. It's not fine. I watched what happened afterward. The other families who came forward. The legislation being proposed. The honest conversations about wealth and responsibility. You didn't do that strategically. You did it because you were tired of lying. And I should have recognized that. Adrian didn't know what to say. Anyway, Chen continued, I'm writing a follow-up piece, not about you specifically, but about what's changed in the 3 months since your interview. I wanted to give you the opportunity to comment. No pressure if you'd rather not. What would you want me to say? Whatever you want. On the record or off, your choice. Adrian thought about it. On the record, I failed at maintaining my family's legacy because I was trying to maintain an illusion instead of adapting to reality. The world changed, and I didn't. That failure hurt people who trusted me, but it also forced me to be honest in ways I'd never been before. And apparently that honesty mattered to people beyond just me. So I failed successfully, maybe, which is the strangest outcome I could have imagined. That's good, Chen said. Can I use that? Yes. But add this too. I'm not a hero or a martyr or a symbol. I'm just someone who screwed up badly and got lucky enough to have people around me who helped me do better. Anyone looking for inspiration should focus on them, not me. Noted. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for calling. After the call ended, Adrian stood in the empty study for a few more minutes, then turned off the lights and locked the door behind him. His car, a 10-year-old sedan he'd bought used because luxury vehicles felt obscene now, was parked in the circular driveway. He loaded the last of his boxes into the trunk, then took one final look at Halverson Manor. 200 years of history. Generations of accumulated wealth and power. All of it built on questionable foundations, maintained through careful illusion, and ultimately collapsed because someone finally told the truth. Adrian got in the car and drove away from the only home he'd ever known, toward a small house in a normal neighborhood where nobody knew or cared that he used to be a duke. The transition was disorienting at first. His new house had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom and no staff. He had to learn how to cook basic meals, do laundry, maintain a yard. Tasks that most people learned in their 20s, Adrian was learning at 34. Elena came over the first weekend to find him staring at a washing machine like it was alien technology. You're an adult man who doesn't know how to wash clothes, she observed. I know it's pathetic. It's not pathetic. It's just evidence that you were raised in a bubble. She showed him how to operate the machine. You're learning. That's what matters. The university speaking engagement happened 3 weeks after he moved into the new house. Adrian stood in front of 200 business students, looking at faces full of ambition and confidence that reminded him of himself at that age. I'm not here to tell you how to succeed, he started. I'm here to tell you how I failed and what I learned from that failure. He talked for 45 minutes. About inherited wealth, about the pressure to maintain appearances, about making investment decisions based on fear rather than research, about lying to staff, to creditors, to himself, about the moment he realized the illusion couldn't hold and the choice to confess publicly rather than let someone else control the narrative. During the Q&A session, a young woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. Do you regret the confession? Knowing what you know now, that you'd recover some of the money, that you wouldn't go to prison, would you still have done the interview? Adrian thought about it carefully. Yes, because the alternative was spending the rest of my life hiding and lying and maintaining a fiction that was eating me alive. The money I recovered didn't come from the confession. It came from a bankruptcy fraud that would have been investigated eventually, regardless. But the ability to sleep at night, to look at myself without disgust, that came from finally being honest. So yes, I'd do it again. Another hand. What advice would you give to someone who's inherited wealth they don't know how to manage? Get help, real help, from people who have no financial stake in your success. Don't trust advisors who tell you what you want to hear. And be willing to admit when you're in over your head before you drown everyone around you. He paused. Also, maybe take some actual business courses instead of assuming the family name is enough. That would have helped. The students laughed. After the talk, several came up to ask more questions. One of them, a senior named Michael, lingered after the others had left. Mr. Halverson, just Adrian. Adrian, I come from a family with money. Not as much as yours was, but enough that there are expectations. And I'm terrified I'm going to fail the same way you did. Adrian looked at this kid, probably 22, earnest, scared in a way Adrian wished he'd been at that age. Then you're already ahead of where I was, Adrian said. I wasn't scared. I was arrogant. I thought failure was something that happened to other people. Your fear means you understand it could happen to you. That awareness is valuable. So what do I do? Be honest. With yourself, with the people who depend on you, about what you do and don't know. It's not glamorous. It won't make you look powerful, but it'll keep you from destroying everything you've been trusted with. Michael nodded slowly. Thank you. After he left, the professor who'd organized the talk approached Adrian. That was excellent. Would you be interested in doing this regularly? We have a series on practical ethics in business. Your perspective would be valuable. I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach ethics. You're not teaching, you're sharing experience. That's different and more valuable, honestly. She handed him a card. Think about it. Adrian took the card. Another possibility. Another direction his life could go. He drove home through evening traffic, listening to a news report about the congressional inquiry his confession had sparked. 3 pieces of legislation were being debated. None of them would fundamentally change anything overnight. But they were steps. Movement in a direction that might eventually matter. His phone buzzed at a red light. A text from James Pritchard. Preservation Society is hosting an opening ceremony for the historical site next month. You're invited. No pressure, but the staff would like you there. Adrian typed back. I'll be there. Another text, this one from Elena. Found an organization that helps people navigate financial recovery after major losses. They need volunteer advisors. Interested? Maybe. Send me details. The light turned green. Adrian drove toward his small house in his used car, thinking about futures that didn't look anything like the past he'd lost. 1 month later, Adrian stood in the gardens of Halverson Manor. No, not Halverson Manor anymore. The Riverside Historical Estate, the Preservation Society had renamed it. More accurate, less pretentious. Hundreds of people filled the grounds for the opening ceremony. Staff members who'd stayed on. Local residents curious about the famous estate they'd never been allowed to enter. Students from nearby schools. Media covering the transformation of a private aristocratic holding into a public educational site. Margaret Wells gave a speech about the importance of preserving history. All of it, not just the flattering parts. Elena spoke about the estate's operational transformation. James Pritchard talked about maintaining the gardens while adapting them for public use. Then Margaret called Adrian to the podium. He hadn't prepared remarks. Didn't seem appropriate to script something that needed to be honest. 3 months ago, I stood in this garden and admitted to millions of people that I'd failed, Adrian said, his voice carrying over the crowd. I'd lost a fortune, hurt people who trusted me, and destroyed a legacy I'd been trusted to maintain. I thought that admission was the end of my story. He paused, looking at faces in the crowd. Elena, Marcus, James, Sarah Chen, other staff members. Thomas Pritchard. Even Evelyn Carter, notepad in hand, still documenting. But it wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. Because when you stop lying, to yourself, to others, about who you are and what you've done, space opens up for something real. This estate isn't mine anymore. It belongs to everyone now. Its history, the good and bad, the success and failure, will be told honestly. And maybe that honesty will help someone else avoid the mistakes I made, or at least make better mistakes. He stepped back from the podium. The crowd applauded, not thunderous, just respectful acknowledgement. After the ceremony, Adrian walked through the manor one last time. The Preservation Society had moved quickly. Exhibitions were already being installed. One room documented the estate's construction and the questionable wealth that funded it. Another showed the evolution of the family through generations. A third, the most painful, detailed Adrian's collapse, complete with excerpts from his confession interview and analysis of what went wrong. He stood in front of that exhibit for a long time, reading his own failures displayed like museum pieces. Strange, isn't it? Evelyn Carter appeared beside him. Seeing your worst moments preserved for educational purposes. Strange doesn't quite cover it. For what it's worth, I think this is more valuable than anything the estate was before. People can learn from this, not just about finance or aristocracy, but about what happens when you finally choose honesty over image. You're being very generous. I'm being accurate. There's a difference. She gestured to the exhibit. This is your legacy now, not the wealth or the title or the parties. This moment when you chose truth over comfort, that's what people will remember. After she left, Adrian stood alone in the room, looking at his life reduced to wall text and documentary photographs. His phone buzzed. Elena, we're all getting dinner after this. Come. Where? That pizza place downtown. The one with the terrible decor and excellent food. I'll be there. Adrian left the manor, the historical site, for the last time. Outside, the summer evening was warm, the gardens full of people exploring spaces that had been closed off for 2 centuries. He drove to the pizza place where 11 former staff members had taken over 3 tables pushed together. They made room for him at the end. Someone handed him a menu, and for the next 2 hours he ate mediocre pizza and listened to people talk about their lives, new jobs, new plans, problems that had nothing to do with estates or legacies or aristocratic failures. It was normal, completely, wonderfully normal. At some point, James raised his glass of cheap beer. To new beginnings. Everyone drank. Adrian looked around the table at people who'd become friends through shared crisis, who'd helped him survive his own worst decisions, who'd stayed when they had every reason to leave. Thank you, he said quietly. All of you, for not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself. We didn't do it for you, James said, but he was smiling. We did it because someone had to keep you from completely self-destructing. Either way, thank you. The evening wound down eventually. People left in groups, heading home or to other plans. Adrian drove back to his small house, parked in his small driveway, and walked into his small life that was bigger than anything he'd had before. He sat at his kitchen table, IKEA, assembled himself after watching 3 YouTube tutorials, and opened his laptop. The university professor's email was still in his inbox, asking if he'd be interested in teaching more sessions. He typed, "Yes, let's discuss details." Another email from the financial recovery organization Elena had mentioned. "We'd love to have you as a volunteer advisor. Your perspective on managing and recovering from financial failure would be invaluable to our clients." He typed, "When can I start?" His phone showed the time, 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, it would be tomorrow. Another day in a life that looked nothing like what he'd planned, but somehow felt more real than anything that had come before. Adrian thought about his father, about legacy and duty and the weight of family names, about 200 years of accumulated history that he'd nearly destroyed through arrogance and fear. But he'd also created something new. Not intentionally, not skillfully, but through sheer brutal honesty when honesty was all he had left. He'd changed a conversation, started a movement, forced people to look at wealth and power differently. That wasn't the legacy his father had imagined, but maybe it was more valuable. The clock turned to midnight. Tomorrow began officially. Adrian closed his laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed in a house he actually owned rather than inherited. A house he'd bought with money he'd fought to recover rather than passively received. A house that represented possibility instead of obligation. He fell asleep not as Duke Adrian Halverson, guardian of a crumbling legacy, but as Adrian, just Adrian, who'd failed spectacularly and survived, who'd lost everything and found something better, who'd learned that sometimes the only way forward is to burn down everything you've built and start over with nothing but truth. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. And somewhere in that city, in offices and apartments and college dorms, people who'd watched his confession were making their own choices about honesty and image, about what they were willing to lose in exchange for what they might gain. Adrian had started something he couldn't control or predict. But for the first time in his life, that uncertainty felt like freedom rather than fear. And in the small house on the normal street where the former Duke had finally learned to be human, that was enough.